All right, it looks like we are live. Woohoo! Good evening, good morning, good day to you all, wherever you are at. Excellent. My audio seems to be coming through good and strong. That is nice. All right, Dorcas Daydreams is here with Down with AI. Oh yeah. Now we're going to get into that tonight. Believe you me. So buckle yourselves in. There's a part of me that wishes, even though it's absolutely not going to happen, that Shad from Shadiversity would just suddenly drop on in here, so that way I could be like, you know what, we're actually going to have a conversation, you and I, because I feel like conversations between people on the internet don't really happen the way that most people think that they are, especially with so many videos just being like, I'm going to take you down. I'm going to take you. No, I'm going to take you down. I'm going to disprove you. While I'm going to try to be as academic as I can be. I might get a little passionate, but I intend to be academic with my approach to this absolutely awful take on AI Ghibli art. It wouldn't be as good. I'd say it's not going to be as good as if I could have Shad here with me and be like, okay, you and I are going to have a real conversation, real rules to this. That way, no one speaks over the other person, timed arguments, all of that good jazz, and then go to town that way. Art says, oh, thank goodness you're streaming. Yes. Say, I am indeed streaming tonight. I was running just a wee bit late, but here I am. And it says, hello, I made it in time. I was about to post my script and comic pages, but I was so busy with real life. Real life happens. Real life happens, Hannah. And real life for me includes this weekend having to do taxes. Yay. Yeah, writing is going to feel a little bit sparse. Art says, AI Ghibli art, oh no, yes. And seeing it too, I'm like, this is just so soulless and just lacks the magic of a Ghibli production. AI just cheapens way too much. ISO says, AI is not an artist. It's a tool that artists can use. For example, I sometimes use AI to recommend better sentence structure when I'm writing and write sentence that feels weird, but AI never writes my stories. Very good. Hafiz is here. Hello. Great to have you here, Hafiz. So yeah, we're going to get into that. And actually, ISO, on the topic of like using AI to like improve writing and everything, like, yeah, we all use, all of us use, if you're using a computer, we all use actually little small AI tools more than we might realize that help to really quickly automate the writing process, especially the editing process, so that way we can make our stories what they need to be. But yeah, there's a big difference between using a tool to help better what you yourself have already written, as opposed to letting AI do the work for you. Which an interesting thing is that I've seen quite a few people online who talk about how bad Hollywood is at writing, how they jump to AI and they have an AI engine crank out like scripts and whatnot for them, so that way they can be like, see, it can be done better. I'm like, you haven't written anything. You put in a prompt, and then based off of an algorithm and what you put into the prompt, boom, it cranked out something. And I would actually love to do a challenge. This would take a little bit of work to set up and to execute, but I think it would be very interesting to show how relying on AI actually really screws you over as an author by having someone have a prompt for a story, put it into an AI engine, and then they don't get to see it. They don't get to see what the AI cranked out. Instead, what would then happen is that story would then get passed off to other people who would take it, read it, and then have questions. And then the person who put the prompt into the AI engine, what I would then want them to do is then write out so many pages, like maybe like 3 or 4 pages of the story the way they would write it, and then have a blind comparison between the two stories that have been written, AI versus author, and also add on to that the other people who have read the AI story and the OG author hasn't, ask the OG author questions based on what the AI story is. And I think what would be interesting to see is how AI interprets your prompt a certain way, and how your own inspiration and imagination would be something completely different. I think that would be a very interesting. Experiment, and might be able to show people that AI might be able to write something well, but it's not your story, because your inspiration took you in a completely different direction and ended up with something else. And on top of that, you can't answer questions about your story that you didn't write. I think that would be a very interesting exercise. Now, granted, there are people who are going to say, well, you're already kind of biased against AI, and sure, that's there. But I think that even the bias excluded, that you would be able to see a vast difference in terms of storytelling and in quality. Master Knight DH says, recently attempted to get my story assessed by the tropers community. Nope, didn't fan out well. They assumed I was caring about labeling, not the story design itself. That's one of the big problems with talking about tropes. And yeah, my connected cartoon universe fan fiction, Master Knight, is actually it is used as an example of a couple of tropes. And I remember when I saw that it was listed, I was like, huh, I would never have thought of that, because that was not what I was intending at all. And the story, again, pans out very differently than what they say the trope should be. Art says, someone I watched for years on YouTube told me to choose a side via YouTube reply. I won't say any more, but OMG. Oh, wow. Wow. That's really weird. I'm just going to say, Arts, my mom also says, my mom showed me a kid's listen generated by AI that has the minute hand on a clock as the hour hand. Oh, a kid's lesson. Yeah, no, don't. People should not rely on AI to get the job done. You can be used to enhance the job if you know what you're doing, but ultimately just do it yourself. It'll end up better. I just said I tried generate AI art for inspiration. I just couldn't make anything good. It was also empty feeling. Yeah, I can believe that. I says when I'm writing, I'll write something that I don't like, so I'll use the AI Copilot, and it will recommend a different approach to the same sentence, and I can decide which one I like better. And that's not bad. Huffy says, to me, using AI in writing cheapens the writing value. Checking senses and spelling, that's what friends are for. So share and connect with other people, no matter who they are. And I think that's a good point right there, Hafiz. Bringing in more people really helps out. Also, you make a good point that I definitely want to second, is that AI doesn't always catch spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes the way that it should. So like, for instance, Word is always telling me that it wants me to do something different in terms of how I should end my sentences or my word usage. And I'm like, no. The verb I use, like, I'll even double check or triple check sometimes in the dictionary. The word I'm using is correct. The AI doesn't believe it is, because it thinks it will make a stronger sentence if it uses a different verb. And I'm like, no, I need that verb, because that is the sentence I'm trying to write. So yeah, a computer is only going to be able to understand a story a certain way. But people can pick up on context way better than a computer can, because writing does connect. It's a metaphysical thing, but writing does connect minds and souls together in a unique way. It's why storytelling is universal. It's why storytelling has existed throughout all of human history. Some of the most ancient stuff that we can date back to humanity involves storytelling. So that should tell us something. That should tell us something. That have other people check out your work. You will get far better insights and opinions and corrections than what a computer can offer you. But that doesn't mean you should all just toss it on out, because again, sometimes it picks up like, I'm horrible with commas, and spell check and grammar can definitely help me out with that. Match Knight says, yeah, more people inevitably provide second opinions or even a better variety of character design. Star says, yeah, spell check is crazy. Master Knight says, I forget the cues I have to answer. Be invited to the D server. Oh, okay. So you want, if you would, Master Knight H, if you want to be invited on over to our Discord server, make sure that you comment with that request in the down in the comments once this is done, or on any of our videos, and we'll reach out to you and begin that process. Because we do an interview, we do a pretty quick interview process with anyone who wishes to join our Discord server, because we've experienced it in the past where people just try to hop on who are trolls. And I know that that's not who you are, but we like to have consistency. We want to make sure that we're being fair to everyone and doing things properly. Because the interview process has helped us identify trolls in the past and make sure that they didn't get onto our server, because when they do get on, it just becomes a mess. And we've had some bad experiences in the past that we don't want to repeat. So, hence the interview process. But again, if you wish to join our Discord server, and this goes to anyone who wishes to join our Discord server, please make sure that you comment that you'd like to join, and then we will begin the interview process. And it's pretty sweet and simple. All right. So since we've already begun talking about AI, let's transition the footage, and we're going to talk about what brought this up. So on Twitter, Shad from Shadiversity, who was being a troll, I'll just say this right here, he was being a troll. Trolls are going to troll, whatever. And I'm not going to get pulled into wrestling with a pig, because when you wrestle with a pig, the pig is happy and you get dirty. I'm not going to fall for the obvious trap. But the thing is that he was like, oh yeah, AI is so much better than the original Studio Ghibli artwork. I completely disagree, because AI art is ultimately stolen art. You yourself are using very few, if any, actual artistic skills, because you are having an engine work off of a prompt that you yourself wrote, thereby stealing other people's work and then creating an image. Boom. That's AI art. If anything, if you are someone who is using an AI engine, you are effectively an art commissioner. You are a customer talking to a robot to create a piece of art for you. And you can continue to review and edit it based off of what you say you want it to do. But you yourself aren't doing the artwork. It's taking artwork and compiling it and recompositing it, taken from other people. It's not your own. That is AI art. So there you have it. But the way where he was coming from, where he's coming from ultimately, is that Shad doesn't like the way that Studio Ghibli art looks. Instead, as you will see, I've got footage from Ghost in the Shell playing right here. And Ghost in the Shell is a very popular, very beautiful, very well told story. Now, comparing Studio Ghibli's artwork to the work in the original Ghost in the Shell is an interesting comparison. It's very interesting because they're two They're two completely different styles. Ghost in the Shell is traditional anime, but it was also a pioneer in combining CGI art with hand-drawn, hand-painted artwork. When you look at Studio Ghibli artwork, Hayao Miyazaki made a point of that his characters were not supposed to look like traditional anime characters, meaning that the eyes on Studio Ghibli characters are actually way smaller than what you would expect from anime. The way that the characters are drawn, the fluidity of their movement is meant to be very different. And so even though we in America, we will easily class Studio Ghibli productions as anime, if you were to talk to Hayao Miyazaki would be like, not really, no. If you want to be crass, sure, you can call my work anime, but my work is my work. My design is intentionally meant to be different. And so it's an interesting debate. Shad walked into a debate that I don't think he actually understood what the different conversations and opinions are behind what he stepped into. Now then, Princess Mononoke is a masterpiece. It is beautiful. Ghost in the Shell is a masterpiece, and it is beautiful. They are equally amazing movies. Very different movies, but equally amazing, and made completely differently. Ghost in the Shell was done with a smaller production crew. Half of their production was based on CGI, and then the other half was based on hand-drawn animation. When you look at the production for Princess Mononoke, it's completely different. The production crew is almost double, if not double, the size of the production crew for Ghost in the Shell, with nearly everyone working on it being in hand-drawn and hand-painted positions. So they're doing all the drawing, all the painting, and compiling all the different shots together, as opposed to Ghost in the Shell, which I was watching a documentary on how it was made, and it's really, really neat. They actually did stuff that I did in high school. I definitely did the rookie version. They did the expert version. So I got nowhere close to what these guys were doing. But they were in the mindset of combining film and VHS technology with the digital technology of the time, using traditional hand-drawn storytelling, which is where you layer all of these different drawn images over each other and then shoot them shot for shot for shot, which then goes onto film, and then they enhance the film with digital effects. It was groundbreaking. Princess Mononoke is a completely different beast that didn't do that. So when you combine the different art styles, along with the different approaches to how the films were made, you immediately get a difference in quality. And honestly, it comes down to your personal taste and aesthetics for what you believe is better. I wouldn't say which one is better, because both animation approaches work amazingly for that particular story. However, since Shad wishes to take a dump on Princess Mononoke and its art style, then allow me then to approach, academically speaking, his arguments and be like, I'm sorry, buddy. We're going to start taking this apart. Click, 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 click. Hafiz says, I would like to follow in Hayao Miyazaki's footsteps. I love The Grave of the Firefly so dearly. That is definitely one of those movies from Hayao Miyazaki that not enough people have seen and not enough people are ready for. So let's talk about how Studio Ghibli approaches its artwork. And well, actually, you know what? Let's do a quick freeze frame right here. So anyone who just stops at one particular shot of any animated feature can easily find something to have gripes with or find what they call a mistake. If you've seen anyone draw animation, frame for frame for frame, you will see some really silly stuff, because cartoons can break all kinds of rules in terms of realism. Even something like Ghost in the Shell, where they were saying, no, we wanted everything to be as realistic as possible, which they do a good job of portraying. But again, there will always be things that animation has to do to capture flow and feel the way that live action and CGI, pure CGI, can never truly capture. But his whole thing was like, oh, look at this. Look at the detail in this image. And it's an image from the beginning where you see a person's hands bust on open and all the different pieces are moving. And it's a very, very impressive scene. It looks really sweet. But he's like, yeah, all the characters are rendered with such high detail. Well, here's one of the main characters, rendered in high detail. You got the quality of the hair, you got the lines, you got his cool cyber eyes. I look at this and I think, Steel Inquisitor. If you don't know what Steel Inquisitor is, they're some of the big baddies from the Mistborn trilogy. Highly recommend reading it. And so we got his coat and everything. It looks nice. Of course, the background is beautifully done. There's a fair amount of quality here. This is not a lazy image at all. Now then, he's like, yeah, look at the laziness for Princess Mononoke. So when we then get to a Princess Mononoke shot, okay, so here we go. Here we got San. Suddenly, right here, if we want to talk quality, here you got all the little individual furs. Here we have her necklace swinging. Her one earring is floating as she's swinging. Her arm looks weird. Her right arm. Why does it look weird? Because this is animating a quick swipe. This is when she's facing off against Ashitaka and the people of Irontown. She's trying to kill Lady Eboshi. This is when she comes in and she's just going full on berserk mode. It is such a beautifully animated scene. It's a great fight sequence. And yeah, to capture how ridiculously fast and strong she is, the body has to be exaggerated in weird ways. And so there you have it. Honestly, about as much detail. Like the background detail isn't all that great for this, and that's actually the point. Because Irontown is not meant to be as beautiful as the forest outside. That is an aesthetic choice. So already, it's like, Shad, let's calm down here, buddy. Let's calm down. There's about as much detail in San right here as there is in Mr. Iron Eyes. The background's different, but the background changes always quite a bit with these movies. And in each movie, meticulous detail has been put in, and each shot is deliberate. It has to be deliberate, because you're animating this, for crying out loud. If you are going to spend millions of dollars to make this thing happen, and you are spending thousands and thousands of hours to put this together, each shot must be deliberate. And so it's like, come on, Shad. Come on here. Just absolutely gorgeous animation. But again, different animating styles. What do you want to do? Was it that you wish to convey? Honestly, the guy is looking for a fight that he wants to be able to be like, see, well, you've come down to my level now. Now we can talk about how great AI art is. When I look at this, I'm like, I don't want to talk about AI art because I know how this functions. You want to talk about the amazing artwork that went into these movies? Oh, we can talk about that. Like how most of Princess Mononoke is hand-drawn and hand-painted. But there are some scenes that are enhanced with CGI where they were forced to use a computer to kind of help speed things along. But Hayao Miyazaki still was like, no, we're going to like draw over this. And so something that people said later on for like Treasure Planet, where they use tons of CGI and then drew over it to give everything a really unique look. And the Disney animators were like, no one had ever done this before. Wrong. Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli had already been working on this more than 10 years before, and even before that, the people doing Ghost in the Shell were doing it. Ghost in the Shell is a freaking monstrosity of production, combining so many different art styles to make this techno dystopia come to life. Whereas for Princess Mononoke, it's very, very deliberate how real, how grounded it's meant to be. And in terms of like character design and character expression, the Studio Ghibli approach to how characters are meant to look is simplistic. Like, it is simplistic to a certain degree. But the reason for that is so that way when characters really begin to show emotion, it's exaggerated without having to truly over-exaggerate the features of the characters, which makes them feel more realistic than your typical anime. Hence the Studio Ghibli style. If you don't like it, Chad, you don't have to like it. But that's the reason behind it. And again, just the amount of detail that went into all of these is just absolutely incredible. It's a comparison between two amazing apples. Shad thought that he was showing a bad apple to a good apple, and then showing how AI makes things even better and it's such great art. But no, don't even bother really with the AI comment. Start talking about the production of these two movies, and you will realize just how gorgeous and masterful they are. So good. So good. If you haven't watched either of them, Ghost in the Shell or Princess Mononoke, highly recommend them. However, both movies are more mature. Say Ghost in the Shell especially. There are some very dark themes and elements to Ghost in the Shell, along with a certain amount of nudity, but like not your crass nudity. Like, it's, I would argue, very tasteful, but it's still there. Whereas Princess Mononoke is, other than the Grave of the Fireflies, is Miyazaki's most brutal story that he's ever told. And especially in comparison to all of his works afterwards, where he does get more fantastical, from Laputa, The Castle in the Sky, Nausicaa in the Valley of the Winds, My Neighbor Totoro, Porco Rosso, and of course Spirited Away. Those movies all have very fantastical, otherworldly qualities. No matter how quote-unquote grounded the story might sometimes try to be. Whereas with Princess Mononoke, even though there's fantastical elements in it, there's nothing about the story that is meant to feel fantastical. It is gritty. It grounds you in this war between men and nature, and the nuances with that particular conflict. And I actually intend to do later this year a review of Princess Mononoke and how it is such a powerful story. And one of the reasons why I intend to do it later this year is because I'm going to be releasing later this year my book, The Tower of Seers, the fourth book in the Legend of the Ten Lords series, which was originally inspired by Princess Mononoke. The characters of Lagerblad and Armina kind of have the whole Ashitaka and San dynamic going on between them, but I take it in a very different direction. And the story ended up kind of becoming what it was, because when I first wanted to write it, I was like, this feels like such a knockoff of Princess Mononoke. I'm not going to be that shameless. And so I started retooling some things, adding in a much grander idea, which was the whole going into the realms of imagination, what it's like for people to utilize their imagination as a form of magic and stuff like that. And so I basically used all of that and then had my retelling of the love story of San and Ashitaka at the heart of the Legend of the Ten Lords. But then the Legend of the Ten Lords quickly became something else. And so the Tower of Seers is in large part me returning to that original idea that helped to start the whole story, and me coming back and say, okay, this now is my take on San and Ashitaka. and what I would have done. And so that's where, so that's one of the reasons why I'm going to do a review of Princess Mononoke, because it's a great movie. There's a lot more analysis that needs to be talked about, needs to be done about it, that I haven't seen done, especially because there's people need to draw a comparison between it and Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, but they haven't. Because Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, just in short, is a very fantastical, almost naive look at the relationship between man and nature. And I think that Miyazaki, after he did Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, realized, you know what? I don't actually like what I did. That was too simplistic. That wasn't nuanced enough. And so Princess Mononoke is phenomenal in admitting nature is violent, nature is dangerous. Humans living in harmony with nature isn't something that really works. But humans destroying nature is unsustainable. It's not good. It's unhealthy for mankind and for the world. And so Miyazaki tackles a really complicated argument and brings it together. And through Ashitaka and San is like, okay, is there a way to find balance between these two worlds that cannot coexist? And that makes it a very beautiful story. Iso says, hey, my dad likes anime, so he tried watching Ghost in the Shell with me and my brothers, and immediately switched it off when the opening played. I do not blame your dad, because yes, that's where a lot of the nudity is. It's if you're not expecting it, it hits you real hard, and if you're part of the underage audience, maybe you shouldn't be watching it. Which is why I say they're both very mature movies. And I recommend that people should watch them, but if you're under the appropriate age for watching a mature film, I personally wouldn't want someone to watch either of them until they are ready. In fact, as a kid, I actually watched Princess Mononoke as a kid, and it went totally over my head. And it was one of those things where it was like, when are my parents going to scold me for watching this? And it wasn't until way later, again, as an adult, that I came back and watched it, and it was like, holy cow, this movie is just amazing. It's so good. And yeah, not necessarily meant for kids. So yeah, that is my response to Shad. AI art is stolen art. Anyone who claims to be an artist using AI art, you're not. You're a commissioner. You're commissioning a robot, an engine, a machine to make something for you. You can continue to plug in as many recommendations and posts and suggestions as you want. It just makes you a good ideas person. And you yourself are not putting in any of the effort to actually learn the proper art styles in order to make this artwork truly come to life. But instead, it relies on stealing other people's work to make something come together. AI art is just that. That's what it is. You can try to convince yourself that it's something else, but it's not. And it's actually one of the things I kind of would love to do again with that idea of having an author compete against an AI engine to write a story, and then have that author have to answer questions about an AI generated story that, sure, they gave it the prompt, but they didn't write it. So what do they truly know about the story that they gave the prompt for? Does it align with what the author envisions? And then when you have them write their own story and compare it against the AI, which one would the author prefer to go with, and why? How does it resonate with the readers? I think there's a really, really good discussion to be had there, and that's something that has yet to truly be facilitated and explored. And I think it'd be fun to be on the cutting edge of that particular part of the conversation, just to show that the people who actually get their hands dirty in the creative process end up knowing way more and fine-tuning skills that they can actually use. Take away an AI engine from someone like Shad, and he says he can do artwork, And I'd love to actually see more of his artwork minus any sort of digital cleaning up and just see what it looks like, because I think he could be really good. But if he just constantly relies on AI, then skills atrophy over time. And that's a real shame. Hafiz says, Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away also inspired my manga. That is so cool, Hafiz. Yes. I can actually kind of see it as well. I love the Spirited Away look. And I would love to see other cultures and other people go the Spirited Away route and like really like just dive into that richness of their culture and explore the supernatural aspect of their culture in an artistic way, because that's what Spirited Away is. And I would love to see more cultures and creators do that. I think that we could get some really, really amazing stories, and at least some very beautiful ones that could open up some much needed conversations about different people, their beliefs, their cultures, their art forms, their legends, all of that. I think that there's so many amazing stories that have yet to be told. And I really, really just want to see more of that. Tyler Goodman says, I blame David Zaslav for destroying the place where Looney Tunes were made to make pointless HBO woke crap. Tyler Goodman, oh my gosh, I've been going right now back and forth about whether or not I want to do a David Zaslav takedown, kind of like what I've done with Disney, because getting rid, the rumor right now, if anyone hasn't heard this, the rumor right now is that the Looney Tunes are getting shopped around. Cartoon Network has been shut down. A lot of the properties that were made through the different animation studios of Warner Brothers have either been shuttered, so you can't even access them on streaming, or they're being sent off to other streamers for cheap to see what people are willing to spend on Warner Brothers' iconic characters. Anthony Dixon, what, Looney Tunes getting sold? That's the rumor right now. There's nothing truly concrete yet to say one way or the other, but that's what's being talked about. And apparently, when Coyote versus Acme was being shopped around, that wasn't just David Zaslav saying, "Oh, this movie's not going to do well, so anyone can have if they want it." It was David Zaslav seeing how much money he could get for a Looney Tunes property. That's right now the working theory, and that he was upset that he didn't get enough. And so he's willing to shatter the entire animated arm of Warner Brothers and sell it off piecemeal, which means that you could have really, really weird combinations of properties where, like, for instance, someone could buy up Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck without getting any of the other Looney Tunes characters. So no Porky Pig to play off of either of them, or Wile E. Coyote, the Road Runner, Yosemite Sam, none of that. And then they could be paired off with Scooby-Doo and the Jetsons, while the Flintstones go to a completely different company. So that means that Hanna-Barbera's catalog would just be ripped to shreds and sold little pieces here and there. Like, it's insane. That's the kind of thing that David Zaslav is going for, because he's like, okay, well, someone might not want to pay like $20 million for all of the Looney Tunes, but they're willing to pay $20 million for Bugs Bunny. So I'll sell off Bugs Bunny. And then I got all these other characters, and I could sell them off for cheap and make extra bucks there along the side. Yeah, that sounds good. That's basically where David Zaslav is going. And it's so stupid. And the thing is this actually then comes around to what Glitch Productions recently brought up, where they said that they've been getting phone calls from people in Hollywood asking, how do you guys do your shows on such a, how do you do them so well? Why are they so popular? How do you make them affordable? And they're just like, I don't know what their conversations are on those phone calls, but I bet that they just say, hey, you know what? You look at a story, you say, is this story something that we can tell? And then you budget it, and then you pay people what they're worth, and you let people work at a good pace. You don't ruin them, and you don't break them, and yeah, cater to the audience with a great story. Let the storytellers do what they want to do. Have faith in them is probably the kind of stuff that they tell these Hollywood executives, which goes completely against their way of thinking, because nowadays Hollywood thinks that producers are good creators and that they can use the writer's room as their own AI engine. Just say, hey, writers, I have this great idea. I want you to write it for me and make it into a movie. And then the writer's room and the directors all start, and the actors and everyone else all get together and they start making a movie or a show. And then the producers are like, oh, no, that's not what I envisioned. Here are my notes. Now make it better. And then they're just plagued with notes and reshoots and notes and reshoots and notes and reshoots. And it's not AI. These are real people. And as you continue to work that way, rather than trusting the creative process, they crank up the budget with all these constant reshoots and redos and notes and blah. And that's how the movies and shows just get to be so ridiculously expensive that it breaks the system. And David Zaslav, who's trying to cut corners and make everything more affordable, he's still using that way rather than trusting the creators to do something good. And that also then comes around in part because Hollywood got rid of a lot of the more idealistic and talented creators and replaced them with people who were there to check off boxes and gain brownie points, which again, brownie points don't mean anything unless you have a way of converting brownie points into actual brownies. And until someone can figure that out, don't do something for brownie points. Do it for the sake of the story. If he says, what heresy is this? Looney Tunes is a part of Warner Brothers. Exactly. Foghorn, Leghorn, Lola Bunny, etc. Yeah, they all belong together. Do not rip them apart. Tyler Goodman says, David Zaslav was tarnishing the Warner Brothers legacy because he's a narcissist jerk, but thankfully Common Side Effects was renewed for season 2, so big W for adult animation. Yeah, but these are also the same people who greenlit greenlit what was that horrible Scooby-Doo spinoff again? Velma. Yeah, Velma season 2. Oh my gosh. And that opens up the whole conversation as well about contracts. When I did my video about how Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin do owe people their books, it's because they're contracted to. If there was no contract involved, it would effectively just be, hey, you know what? You need your story needs you, and the world needs your stories. Please write good stories, guys. Get them on out there because people want to read them. But instead, it goes beyond that because they have contracts saying that they must complete their story, that they must complete their series of books or produce a comparable amount of books that can be sold otherwise under that same contract. And the same thing happens in Hollywood. Writers and directors are contracted for specific projects, or maybe not for specific projects, but to do a certain number of projects. And I'm pretty certain that David Zaslav was just like, you know what? There's a contract on the books for Mindy Kaling and her people. We'll just let them do what they want to do. And yeah, we don't mind flushing away money. Maybe it'll be a good excuse for me to shut down the animation division. Yeah! Just like how Disney purposefully torpedoed Treasure Planet to create an excuse to start downsizing their own animation branch. So annoying. If he says, like building the train track while the train is moving. Exactly, Huffy's. Everything that they're doing is like trying to build the train track while the train is barreling towards you. It can't be done. You're going to have an accident. Tyler Goodman says, good news, AJ. Gene said they would like to revive The Critic, an amazing show. Interesting. That'd be interesting if The Critic gets revived. I don't know how well it would do today. It's kind of like when the Animaniacs got rebooted and they brought them on back. And I was like, I just don't know, because the 90s, they could get wild with their jokes. They could be way more free than we are now. People are like, oh, we're so like there's censorship isn't a big deal right now. Oh yes, you are not as free to tell the stories that you want to tell today than if you were in the 90s, which is funny because people in the 90s complained that their stories were always being censored. But compare like storytelling now to the storytelling of the 90s. The 90s were wild. They got away with so much more than we do today. And again, that comes down to producers and their darn notes and trying to micromanage everything. It's such a mess. Tyler says, I bet the critic would mock AI, David Zaslav, Bob Iger, and other what crap. This would be funny. It would be funny. It would be funny. And hopefully it'd be written well. And because that's another thing is that the Animaniacs were really well written and hilarious back in the 90s. And then trying to watch the reboot / remake stuff of today for the Animaniacs, it just wasn't quite as funny. The writing quality had definitely gone down. And this is a big problem. Great ideas do not great stories make. Reviving the critic sounds amazing, but you have to have the right people behind it to make it happen. And sometimes it's not always the original people that are going to make it. They're going to make it great. You kind of see that with the Dragon Prince. These are the same people who delivered to us Avatar: The Last Airbender, easily one of the best shows of all time. But you don't always strike gold. And while I myself really do enjoy the Dragon Prince, I will admit there are definite problems with the Dragon Prince. And the animation of the first season was definitely something to get used to. Oh boy. So it doesn't always work the way that you hope that it would. And not everyone always gets it right. George Lucas, great storyteller, doesn't always get it right. Same with Steven Spielberg. Great director, great storyteller, doesn't always land right. We all have our off days. We all have our off stories. And if you want to know mine, because I'll be honest, I'll tell you what I know my off stories are. Definitely one of my off stories is, which is funny to say because this book has a perfect rating on Amazon. Sandwich Desperados. That is not a well-written book. It is not. It's funny. It's really funny to read, and it's partly funny to read because it's poorly written. Why that book has a perfect rating, I don't know. That's definitely not one of my best books. Knights of Halicruz, while it's what kicks off The Legend of the Ten Lords, is plagued with so many bad habits of when I was in grad school writing academic papers. So that definitely, it makes it a bit of a slog to get through at times, which isn't good for epic fantasy. So definitely Sandwich Desperados, Knights of Halicruz, not exactly my best stories. And I'll be interested to see what anyone might have to say about something like Study in Blood, because A Study in Blood was a hard one for me to write because of how mature it gets later in the book, which again, even though I like it if anyone reads my books, A Study in Blood is not meant for younger audiences. That is an 18+ book. So anyone below 18, please hold off reading A Study in Blood. Because that is a more intense book. And so it might not be one of my better ones just because I leaned outside of my normal comfort zone to write what I did. So yeah, we all have our off days. We all have our off stories. All right, let me get a drink right here. But yeah, at some point, I think I will have to do a takedown of David Zaslav and how he's treated animation. And it's not just him. His actions are indicative of the entire storytelling industry. Cartoons are looked down on. That people are like, they're dumb. They're expensive. They don't tell great stories. And part of the reason why I think producers don't like them is because if you're going to redo animation, it costs way more than having to redo live action. Because the interesting thing is this, is that if you compare budgets between cartoons to live action, they actually cost about the same. With animation usually being cheaper in terms of big budgets. Big budget-wise, animation will always be cheaper. If you want to go bare bones, live action is usually cheaper than animation, unless you're doing a production like Hoodwinked. Which part of the charm to Hoodwinked is that the animation is so bad. But yeah, producers in Hollywood hate animation, and I think part of it comes down to that if they try to micromanage it, they end up ruining themselves way quicker than with live action, because doing constant reshoots, or in this case reanimation, is way more expensive, and it takes longer for their notes to be implemented, which makes it just a very difficult thing for them to micromanage. It makes it way more annoying, and it's way slower. And I think that's one of the reasons why producers don't like working with animation. And so it becomes very convenient to create and propagate lies about animation in terms of how it's unprofitable, that it's way too expensive and way too unwieldy. All of those arguments are not true. So Tyler Goodman says also Michael Kovac will be the voice of Diligence in the Gaslight District. Yeah, I saw that. Michael Kovac, he's going to be a part of every single Glitch production till the day he dies. At this point, he will be somewhere. He will be doing something. He's becoming the Alan Tudyk of indie animation at this point. He's in everything. Okay, so you know what? Unless anyone else has got things that they wish to say on the topic of Hollywood being dumb, AI, hot takes on Twitter, I'll give you guys a moment to crank that out. But I think it's time that we can start shifting gears on over to talking about what this live stream really is supposed to be about, which is inspiration, where we draw inspiration from the things that we ourselves have lived through, our talents, our hobbies, how they can either inspire our stories or become elements within our stories that help to strengthen them. And I really want to tackle head on this stupidity that critics are now trying to make popular about how, well, you should write what you know, but most people don't really know what they're writing about. So when you write the stuff that you do know, it's lame and dumb. And so stop being a writer. Nah. Oh, I hate that argument. I hate it so much. I'm Omega's here. Bonjour. What did you miss? You missed my my tirade against AI art, AI writing, Shad from Shadiversity, David Zaslav, and how the Looney Tunes are rumored to be for sale. So yeah, all fun things that you missed on Omega. But don't worry, so long as the stream doesn't get blocked by someone, then you can always go on back and check it all out. Say that is the goal, to have this stuff open and available to anyone who wishes to view what we are working on and what we're talking about. Since no one has said that they wish to have anything else talked about in terms of AI art and the likes, then let us proceed. I don't know. It says, "Geez, forgot about the Looney Tunes." No one should forget the Looney Tunes. I mean, Space Jam is about to get taken off of Netflix, which is a real shame. I should definitely watch that before they take it down, because then it's probably going behind closed doors forever. Curse you, David Zaslav! Oh man, love the Looney Tunes stuff. And supposedly, Coyote versus Acme is getting a second shot at life. Is again another rumor, and I really, really hope that's the case, because I want to see it. I hear it, like, again, rumors are that it's absolutely hilarious, and I really, really want to see it. When I've told other people who don't know about the movie, like, what the basic premise is, it causes immediate laughter, because it's like Wile E. Coyote suing Acme over all the Acme products that didn't work across like all the decades of Coyote versus Roadrunner cartoons. Sign me up. Oh my gosh, it sounds just absolutely great. So let's start talking about inspiration, and we will be talking a little bit about one of the most recent episodes of the Apothecary Diaries, for two reasons. One, because it was the latest episode that actually inspired me to talk about this topic, and also no one has claimed a frog yet. And so for those of you who are here who haven't yet gotten a frog, you have a chance to win a frog. So let's quickly talk here a little bit about inspiration. Inspiration comes out of anywhere. And inspiration is kind of like love that way, where when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore in the water. Inspiration comes from so many different places and angles and backgrounds, and just sometimes from the newest thing that we've learned, or from a hobby that we've had for a very long time, from an interest that we might have had, from something new that we learned, a person that we interacted with, a member of the family, a trip that you went on. Inspiration can come from anywhere. I think one story that for years I wanted to write, but in the end I just kind of shelved that idea. I wanted to write based on the weirdness of my family's backyard. Because back in the day, there used to be tons of eucalyptus trees everywhere, but storms were tearing apart the eucalyptus trees during each monsoon season. And eucalyptus trees are heavy, and if they fall on your house, they do major damage to your house. So my folks eventually were like, you know what, these trees need to go. And so it was a slow process of getting rid of these trees, which created a very weird landscape in my backyard. And I was like, man, what would it be like if I wrote a story of of this changing world where these giants come and are uprooting these ancestral towers, which are large trees, and you have these like fairy folk who are in these different kingdoms, aka these different trees, warring against each other. And you've got adventurers who ride with the caravans of ants and stuff like that. And I kind of had like this idea of like a Silk Road for fairies who live with the bugs, and maybe some like great romance between different kingdoms. The prince and the princess of two different kingdoms and their different trees falling in love with each other. And just what would that look like? And then the constant threat of these giants who are destroying the towers. Oh, what will we do? And so like it was a neat idea. And it was inspired by the weirdness of my own backyard and during the time of getting rid of eucalyptus trees. So inspiration can come from just about anywhere. And what I want to hear from you guys, please sound off in the chat, because I really, really want to hear this. This will be the basis of what we're going to work on tonight. Is I want to read in the chat a topic, a hobby, an event, a bit of knowledge, or a person that has inspired you to tell a story, whether it's a story that you're right now working on or a story idea that you're not working on right now. I want to hear that inspiration. And so I'll write down as well something that's inspired me. So I put it here into the chat, right in the chat. One thing that has inspired you to tell a story. And for myself, since we're doing this together, say one of the things that inspired me to tell stories is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I can only begin to describe just how influential Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade has been to me as a storyteller. And it's funny because I don't talk about it all that much, but absolutely, like as a young teenager, I wanted to go out on archaeology trips. I wanted to fight the Nazis and uncover great lost treasures. I wanted to encounter ancient traps. And it's kind of funny because at the time I hated history. History was my worst subject in school, but I loved the storytelling of history. And then I had a teacher in high school who inspired me to get more into history and come to love it and get beyond the names and the dates I had to memorize and talk about the stories. And it finally it married the two things together, Indiana Jones and history. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to tell those kinds of stories. And I even have two scenes in my book, Monarch Mercenaries Autonomy. There's two scenes that in that book that are inspired from the Indiana Jones movies. Actually, and both of them actually have to do with moments from Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was just fun to put in. Like, one guy's like, there are no traps. I know, it's the perfect time. I don't have to worry about what happens when I swap this thing out. And then everything starts coming to life. All these zombies in this frozen temple just start bomb rushing him. And he's like, come on. And then there's a stone, like the rolling stone that tries to crush Indiana Jones in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. In another scene, there's a magical boulder that flies after people and tries to smash them if they try to get to a treasure. And so they're like, oh, crud, how do we get to the treasure? How do we get to the treasure? And I love the solution to that particular puzzle. That was one of those moments where I'm like, I'm a genius. How did I get to this point? Iso says, gosh, I don't even know one specific thing. I've always been a creative person, and I love daydreaming. Crafting stories in my head, watching shows and reading books, seeing the creativity of others. But Iso, since I know a little bit more about some stuff that you do, what if you, and I know this, I'm handing this one to you in this case, but what about all of your work with sparring and fencing and swordsmanship? You've talked about it before, but like, has that ever inspired a specific story, or is it just kind of inspired storytelling elements? Hafiz says, I love the Metal Gear Solid series. They are quirky and serious at the same time. Hideo Kojima is a gaming mad scientist. I don't know enough about the Metal Gear Solid series, Hafiz, but everyone who has played those games absolutely loves them. And I do agree with you. The thing, from what I have seen, even though I've not played them, I've seen footage and everything. Yes, the merger of quirky and seriousness in the Metal Gear Solid franchise is uncannily good. It is good. So that's something great to draw inspiration from. Iso says, I've always been drawn to darker stories, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, excellent. Dark Souls, Lost Planet, and even Murder Drones. Ooh, good options. Good sources of inspiration. Master Knight DH says, Battalion Wars, Fire Emblem, and Ultima Quest of the Avatar come to mind for gameplay. Ooh, very nice. Good. Those are some good points of inspiration. Say, let's see if I can. Do I have one of the books near me? I don't have. Let's see here. No, it looks like I don't have. Wait, there we are. Bleed, Steam, and Steel. It's probably a good thing I don't have a working camera right here, so you guys can't see the absolute mess that is my office space. There we are. Grabbing up a book. Yeah. From a box. There we are. Bleed, Steam, and Steel. Iso says, my sword sparring has inspired my writing. I've always liked swords and cinematic sword fights, so I wanted to write a story about swords and magic, but I didn't know how to sword fight. So in my battle, all right, we'll see what you guys say next. Descriptions were lackluster and driven by luck and chance. So in one of my stories, I decided that his whole ability system would revolve around swords. Well, that's cool. That's really cool. Now then, to kind of like give an illustration of like, again, something that's inspired me, which is history, because I have 2 degrees in history. When I wrote Bleed, Steam, and Steel, I really wanted to communicate history in different ways, because the world of Ida, which is my steampunk world, uh, has all these different cultures and people to it, and I wanted to capture their history without giving you history lessons in the book, which I really wanted to do, but I didn't. I spared you all history lessons, and instead what I did is I captured moments of history through the chapter openings. So you have the chapter title, and then there's a description that gives you something about this world's history and its multiple cultures. And depending on who you are reading from, you get something different. So if you're reading Asuka's chapters, you get sword techniques. If you are reading General Wesley Arthur's chapters, you get brief descriptions of big battles that happened in the past. For Zemon, you get musings from spy masters from the past. And when you read Lagertha's chapters, you get songs. And each one of those insights into history and culture tie into something that happens in that chapter. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, man, I don't know what inspired me to do that, but it's amazing. Iso says, so know that I know how to sword fight. So now that I know how to sword fight, my main character also knows how to sword fight properly. And I know how I can handle his training arc, and his ability is basically magic swords, so that's cool. I like that, Iso. I'm so looking forward to reading more of your story, because it just sounds like so much fun. And that goes really for all of you guys and gals. Like, I can't wait to see all the stories that you guys that you come up with and that you share with the world, because of the things that all of you have shared with us here on this channel are just fantastic. So let me quickly then share some of my own stuff right here. So chapter 10 of Bleed, Steam, and Steel, 2 Mountains, 1 Valley. This is the art of wielding both katana and wakizashi simultaneously, but it is more than simply using both swords. It is a philosophy to use all weapons at your disposal to crush your enemy. It is a philosophy of focus. And what is neat about the 2 Mountains, 1 Valley is that you're supposed to ultimately bring both of your weapons to cleave a massive gash into your enemy. And the way that Asuka does it is so much fun. Iso, I would love to get Iso's take on this particular sword fight, because you have a guy who uses a large. So they're in these giant mech suits, steam-powered mech suits, but they still are wielding these large weapons of a massive katana and a massive wakizashi that Asuka has, and her opponent has a massive cavalry blade, which I can't remember right off the top of my head what the name of that particular weapon is, but it looks like a katana, but it's way longer with a much larger hand, so that way you could spread your hands for a much more powerful slice and cut out the legs of horses or cut off their heads as they come riding up on you, which is what this guy's trying to do. He's trying to use his reach to slice open her suit's joints. And what she does is she at one point she's forced to leap up into the air. And so she takes both of her weapons and comes bringing them crashing down on top of him. And with just the pure weight of her suit, even though he blocks it, all of that force just comes down and cleaves into his suit's helm and just shatters it. Oh, it's such a fun moment. I'm Omega says, Takusa for me like Super Sentai. Power Rangers and Kamen Rider, Bionicle and other Lego lines, web series with like No Evil, which I'm Omega. I've got No Evil queued up. I have No Evil queued up. I am going to watch it. I remembered this week. I actually have it up and ready to go on my computer right now. Games like Deltarune, Bionicle Heroes, and so much more. That's awesome, I'm Omega. I like that spread. And I recently watched a really good review of the original Time Power Rangers done in Japan. And I was like, that's really neat. And they compared it to how they cleaned it up, quote unquote, cleaned it up to make it more appropriate for kids in America. And I'm like, oh man, the Americans butchered such a good story. ISO says, I actually love that. I have a scene that I'm planning where my MC in his sword story is surrounded in an alley, and he uses a montante, as I'm guessing you pronounce it, montante, which is a great sword fighting style, to escape and free up space to fight. I'm gonna make a Time Ranger. Yes, Time Ranger. That's the one. Time Ranger. ISO, I really look forward to reading Bleed, Steam, and Steel. It sounds so epic. Again, if people wish to support what we do here at Camille's Harem, please check out the books that we published. Bleed, Steam, and Steel is my writing group's favorite story of the ones I've written. And I love this book as well. Let me also pull up another... let's see here. Let me grab up another example. Okay, so here we are. Chapter 8. The Battle of Kuxawal. Deep in the Zambian jungles lay the mountain stronghold of Kuxawal, which refused to serve the king Jamol. Jamol sent his best warriors to besiege the mountaintops. Though they called it a battle, it was a 10-year siege, because both sides could live easily off the plentiful jungles, and mountains are impossible to fully surround. After 10 years, Kuxawal was forced to surrender due to the number of men and women it had lost in battle over the past 10 years. Jamol's losses were never recorded, but the Battle of Kuxawal is remembered with many tears. And so, yeah, so you get this historical reference to the Battle of Kuxawal, which then leads to what General Wesley Arthur has to deal with, the sacrifices that he has to make. And at this point in the story, you don't really know yet what those sacrifices all entail, but you find out as you read along. So each battle, each insight into the sword forms, give you some insights into what the characters are going to go through, as well as the history of the world. Here you have Zemon, so chapter 13, Spy Proverbs, volume 2. Only in fanciful stories do spies accomplish their missions at parties. A real spy may wine and dine with the enemy, but the action always takes place far from the residencies of the cultured courtesans. Steel Spy Master, circa 1083. And so, a funny little detail right there, because yes, most spies do not get to live the glorious James Bond life. The irony is that in this particular chapter, Zemon gets to live the quote-unquote glamorous spy life, and it ain't fun. So that's the kind of fun that I have right there with utilizing my inspiration of history, how I love history and how history has, since I was young, helped to inspire the kinds of stories I want to write. So even though I'm not writing a history per se, I still included those little bits of history. I'm Omega. If you want recommendations for Super Sentai, then I suggest Avataro Sentai Dawn Brothers and Juken Sentai Geki Ranger for character development and cool suits. Also recommend the Neo Heisei trilogy, Kamen Rider W, Kamen Rider O, and Kamen Rider Forze for a great time. All right, well, thank you. That's a lot of Kamen Rider too. So thank you guys for sharing with me your inspirations. Now then, I want you to hold on to some of that as we now transition on over to, we're still going to stay on this topic of inspiration, but we're going to transition on over to the Apothecary Diaries. So again, we want to give out the frogs that Camille has been drawing. We've got frogs ready to go, just no one has yet claimed them. So as we watch through this, First person to comment with the correct number of frogs will win a hand-drawn frog from Camille. I will actually accept 2 different answers for this particular video. And the reason for that is because there's a frog. It's the same frog who shows up 3 separate times in the way that the video is cut, but it's still technically just one frog. So there's technically 2 answers. Hannah says, I'm back. Sorry, I'm busy again. Hey, Hannah, don't worry about it. When you're busy, you're busy. Say, I'm not going to be angry if someone can't make it to a live stream because they've got stuff that they got to do. Like, that's not cool on my part. I don't control your life, nor should I. All right. So, again, this episode is what really inspired me to kind of think about doing this particular topic of inspiration, because the creator for the Apothecary Diaries most definitely did their research into all kinds of things, like medieval Chinese, Renaissance Chinese, the application and knowledge of ancient medicines, that when you bring this all together is just, it's so much fun. It's so good. Now then, in this particular episode, so in the episode from last week and the one that just premiered this week, we are taken on a hunt, a royal hunt, complete with hunting lodge and and all of the fantastic trappings. And what I loved when it came to the and remember, count the frogs, 3 thus far, and there's 6. Darn, I'm kind of giving away numbers here. So what I personally loved about this episode, and what made me just be like, woohoo, yes, yes, was how it tapped into the history of royal hunts. And royal hunts aren't just about going out and hunting. Oh no. Royal hunts were a political affair. What you would do on a royal hunt is you were trying to show off your wealth. If you're the person who's facilitating the hunt, you're like, look how many dogs I have, how many horses I have for you all to ride. Look at the lands that I own, full of critters that we can fight against. Hardy boars and bears, vicious wolves, great stags. Yes, our honor and prowess are going to be tested today. By the way, have I shown off all my amazing falcons that respond to the trainer doing his little whistle? They don't respond to me, they respond to the falconer. And like, that's a big brag. Not only can I afford a falcon, I can afford guys to take care of and train my falcons. I can afford all these horses. I can afford these lands. I can afford a beautiful hunting lodge. It's all for show. I once went to a royal hunting lodge in Germany where we were not allowed to take pictures, which was a real shame. It was opulent. Oh my gosh. It was basically a mini castle with these big rooms for people to like rest in, big, like a huge feast area where they would eat their kills. And it was looking out on the hunting grounds. It was just gold and special paintings and everything all over the place. All the paintings were of the lords of the manor after like some great kill, all painted, of course, to look incredibly impressive and more handsome than they actually were. It was all for show. It was all for how wealthy am I. I can intimidate lesser nobility, or I can impress higher nobility with how rich I am, with how good of a hunter I am. I'm so strong. I'm so clever. Did I forget to say I'm so rich? Like, that's basically what royal hunting trips were all about. And when you watch the latest episodes of the Apothecary Diaries, pay attention to the setting. Like where Gingy right now is lounging, that is a hunting lodge, and that's a frog. But he's in a hunting lodge. And when you look at this hunting lodge, it looks like a palace. And that's because the lord of the manor wants to impress everyone. I'm so rich. I'm the second most wealthy man just behind the emperor. I can afford to have a palace in the middle of the woods. And then later on, I can afford to have houseboats that are lavishly decorated and cluttered with furniture, where you will dine on exquisite meals with the most expensive alcohol. It's all for show. It's all for show. If you were, however, a really good hunter, you could then impress people with your actual skill, and then people are like, ooh, and they'd gossip about you for the next year or so about how amazing you are at hunting. You're like, yes, I may be a bastard at heart, but I'm a great hunter. So knowing the history of a hunt, of a royal hunt, really helps you to make this a very interesting sequence of events within the story. It could be very easily, they went on a hunt, and during the hunt, there's an assassination attempt on Jinji's life, and Jinji and Mao Mao have to escape, and they end up in a cave together. Ooh, scandalous, sexy times. That's how most modern writers would write it, where effectively the hunting trip is an excuse to just create a steamy scene. However, the Apothecary Diaries uses the very real execution and concept and political machinations of ancient royal hunts to be like, no, this is about power. This is about impressing and scaring other people. And this does also exist as a chance to get rid of someone, because there's all kinds of accidents that can happen during a hunt. A misfire, a boar crashes into you and gores you, you get left alone in the woods. All kinds of things could happen. Iso says, I love using history to inspire significant events in my stories, specifically things that happened a really long time ago, like the fall of the Roman Empire or the Norse conquest. Yeah, draw on those things. It's inspiring. It's something that people know, and it can be a whole lot of fun to apply to your own fictional story. And it says, it's not that. I missed stuff and never got a chance to say anything. Oh, I'm sorry, Hannah, but you're here now, and hopefully you do get some stuff to say. And you can always comment on the video later on, and we read your comments, and we like to reply back. But yeah, so in these two episodes of the Apothecary Diaries, using actual history to help communicate a whole lot more of what's happening, of the dangers that Lord Shizo presents to Jinji and Mao Mao, of how people would actually use these kinds of hunts to try to assassinate people that they wanted to get rid of. I myself have utilized that in one of my stories. In fact, the next story that I will be publishing, The White Snake, has a royal hunt scene where the main character, much like Jinji and Mao Mao, is being set up for execution, for assassination. They plan to utilize the woods to create a moment where people are confused, where they don't know what's going on, so that way they can then isolate and get rid of the main character and make it look like an accident. Oh, a boar got him. That's why his guts have been torn open. Because back in the day, the idea of forensics didn't really exist. It's thanks to people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and his creation, Sherlock Holmes, and also a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe, if we're going to be honest. Edgar Allan Poe and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, through fiction, actually helped to inspire the field of forensics, which didn't really exist until the late 1900s. Fun little history fact right there. So let me take another drink of water. Yeah, so back in the day, people might have known what might have been like a good sword wound and what was a good boar wound, but it's a royal hunting trip. And who knows, like if you come across someone's political machinations to assassinate someone else, unless you have a vested interest in one side surviving or not, you would stay out of it, because you don't know if you're going to run afoul of a more powerful person in their woods, and that could end up making you an enemy, and then you get bumped off on the hunt. Which is a dynamic that's actually exploited in these episodes. And so, the writers for this show and for the original story knew their history and drew inspiration from it to facilitate a really dynamic moment. Because yes, it is about helping to push the relationship between Jinji and Mao Mao, but it's also to establish the danger that Lord Shizo presents, the power that he has because he's so fantastically rich that no one, not even the emperor, can really stand up to him because he's just that powerful. Also, you get to see some of the other political factions within this fictional Chinese empire who are vying for influence, who are trying to get rid of certain people, trying to make sure that someone might end up on the throne eventually. And so there's a whole lot going on. Also, the introduction of proper guns, which is something interesting to say because the handgun that is used by the assassins was a horrible choice for an assassination in the woods. If you're going to kill someone on a hunting trip and they're not going to have the decency to get gored by a boar or flattened by a bear, then you probably want to shoot them with an arrow rather than try to use a pistol. The thing is this, so thinking a little bit about things, if we draw it on back, and this is actually something that's used in the show, is that they're able to actually identify who could have used which arrow because different lords have different specialty bows and arrows that they've been using on the hunt. So an arrow could identify which lord or faction attempted to assassinate Jinji and Mao Mao. But if you use a pistol, because this is back again before forensics and before the rifling of guns. Rifling, for those of you who don't know, is that you take the tube of metal that the bullet is going to pass through, and you twist it. By giving that metal a twist, what it does is it then takes hold of the bullet as it's passing through the barrel, and it spins it. By spinning the bullet, it has a better chance of going where you're aiming. But without that spin, especially a ball, which is what almost all bullets were back then, would have a good chance of spinning off in a direction that you didn't want it to. So the assassins actually need to be really close in order to use a pistol effectively. But if you use a pistol, it's harder to identify who used it so long as you can bury or destroy the pistol. So the pistol, in the minds of these assassins, makes a really good untraceable weapon. The only thing is that, again, a pistol back in the day, hundreds of years ago, you need to be up close to get a good proper shot off. Which is why, and this is again, let me just kind of bounce here on history. Oh, I love history. This is why dueling was so dangerous and why, for instance, some people during duels would say that they would take so many paces. Because if you have 10 paces, or if you have more than 10 paces between you and your opponent, there's a good chance, not a perfect chance, but a good chance that your opponent's bullet will not reach you because it's going to spin away before it hits you. But at 10 paces, there's a very good chance that bullet is going to hit you, and it's not going to be pleasant. And the medicine they had at the time was not good enough to really deal with bullet wounds. And so a bullet wound could be very fatal, more fatal than any other wound that could have been delivered by a projectile weapon at the time. And so that is why the assassins are using a gun, even though a pistol is not the best thing at that time to have used because of how inaccurate it is. Because there's a greater chance of actually killing the target, and it would be harder to trace it to you, especially if you have a way of hiding the gun. Because again, modern forensics isn't there to connect gunpowder residue to you. So these assassins are being pretty smart, except for the fact that, again, they fire from way too far away. They're like, oh, sweet, pistol. And it's a good make and model. It's going to be totally accurate. And they fire from 30 meters away. So that's like 90 feet away. Anywhere between 60 and 90 feet away. What are meters anyway? And so these guys absolutely are more than 10 paces away, and so their bullets miss Jinji and Mao Mao completely. And that's, again, good historical representation. The creators did their research. They know how this stuff works, which is a whole lot better than a whole lot of other authors. I mean, how many of us have been guilty of writing guns inaccurately. I was going to say inappropriately, but that's not the right word. Inaccurately. Like, there's no such thing as recoil. All of my bullets hit exactly where I want them to go, and I don't need ear protection. When you fire a gun, it is loud. It will deafen you. So you need to have proper ear protection, and recoil is absolutely a thing. And the different make of gun you use, and the different bullet you use will all influence the end result of using that gun. And that went even for more ancient guns as well. So again, writers did their research. I applaud them. The use of history. So inspiring. Todd Goodman said AI also make a fake cease and desist for Studio Ghibli. Oh, AI. This AI nonsense. I don't know how real this is, because again, it was on Twitter. So who knows how real this is. But I saw on Twitter that apparently Hayao Miyazaki responded to the use of AI. And he's just like, why are you guys doing this? This is awful. This is dumb. Like, this is not art. And I agree with him. AI art has its place where you can do funny things with it, but passing it off as art, disingenuous. And same with that cease and desist letter. Disingenuous. Now then, this is where I want to switch into the next gear of this conversation. So we've talked about some of the stuff that inspires you in your stories, and we've had a look here right here. Like, I've gone off on my little history tirade because I love talking history when it comes to the Apothecary Diaries. Hopefully someone found the correct number of frogs, and I'm going to transition on over. What I'm going to do. I'm just bring up right here my Dress Up Darling, which is a great show, and we're getting the next season real soon. Such a good story. ISO says it's very easy to write guns like some sort of super powered weapon. I used to write them like a magic wand. Just point it and you win. I know exactly. I mean, when I write guns, I normally have guns in a far more chaotic setting. So bullets are flying everywhere and you don't know what's going to happen. But it in a more one-on-one type of a setting, or if there's fewer people, guns can do so. Guns are way more chaotic, way more deadly, and way louder than most people realize. And writing them into a story in a way that actually makes sense and doesn't just simply give the hero a chance to gun everyone down and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando. You got to work on a little bit. Commando is a fun movie to watch, but for crying out loud, the fact that none of the paramilitary guys are able to hit him in the last action scene is redonkulous. All those guys were awful soldiers. How they managed to survive so long, I don't know. ISO says, yes, Dress Up Darling Season 2. I know. I'm so excited. My Dress Up Darling is just such a great story. I'm sad that the manga came to an end the way it was so abrupt. There was one. So real quick, little side tangent right here. There is a loose thread, a major loose thread in the story that is never wrapped up, and it really, really frustrates me. So Kitagawa, the girl right here, she and Gojo pull off a cosplay that even the manga creator himself said was impossible. He created a character who was just so inhuman, and also the way that their body looked. He was like, yeah, there's no way that you can do this. No prosthetics or anything that can make you look like the creature that I drew. And Kitagawa wants to do it. And so she and Gojo spend an entire arc trying to figure out how to make this one costume work. And it's amazing what they come up with. And it's something you can even apply for real life cosplay. And as a result, Kitagawa becomes famous around Japan, but no one knows who she is. And so there's this huge hunt to find Kitagawa, to figure out her identity and expose her as the amazing cosplayer who did the impossible, who even impressed the mangaka with being able to capture his creation. And so it's this huge thing that plays out for multiple chapters, and it's never wrapped up. And it's so frustrating. Oh! So I would hope, that if the anime gets all the way to the end of the manga, that they address that loose thread, because it's such a frustrating loose thread. Because there were so many chapters dedicated to it, and then there's no resolution. Hafiz says, "Nah, I win." I win. Hey, John is here. John Wells, yo, what up, pimps? Oh, John. We were talking real quick about My Dress Up Darling, and how people don't write guns in an accurate way. As ISO said, like, guns are like wands. Point, bam, enemy dead. And like none of the things about recoil or how a gun runs out of ammo, the sound of a gun, the weight of a gun, because there are some guns that are really heavy. And then if you're going up against a bunch of other people with guns, there's a chance that you're going to get hit. As much as we love Commando, that ending scene, while amazing, is ridiculous, because Arnold Schwarzenegger should absolutely have been shot. But anyway, so why am I bringing up right here My Dress Up Darling? So again, it is all about the inspiration, the inspiration for a story. So the mangaka for My Dress Up Darling really wanted to talk about cosplay. And so they wrote a rom-com surrounding cosplay, and used their knowledge of cosplay to create a very interesting story. And you can do the same with your own stories. So, like, for instance, Sandwich Desperados was written off of my knowledge and my interest of the underground racing scene in Tucson, of the illegal racers that rip through the streets every now and then. And also based on my time as a sandwich delivery guy at Jimmy John's, and the questionable lengths that we went to deliver our sandwiches. I wrote what I knew, and I combined one of my interests into the story. Though, here's the thing. Even though I enjoyed that approach, I don't really know a lot about cars. I'm not a cars guy. It's never quite clicked with me. And so I had to reach out to my friend Nate, fellow Harem member, and was like, what can you tell me about cars? He loves talking about cars, and so he talked me through what kind of cars would work really well in a racing scenario with the roads that I was utilizing in the story. And I used that information to help make my world, as ridiculous as it is, my story, feel just a little bit more believable, and that I wasn't just simply saying, fast car, go brrr, and have no idea what I'm talking about. I still don't know much about cars, so I heavily relied on Nate to get the right details to make the races feel real to the reader. And that someone who knows something about cars won't just think, Lars is an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They'll say, Lars got some things right, but really, I think I would use this. And that's actually a good conversation. If someone were to come up to me and say, Lars, when you wrote Sandwich Desperados, I think that the car that should have been used was this one. And I would have these kinds of specs for the car. And I'd be all like, that's amazing. I'm glad that you thought more about the car than I did. And I'm glad that you're not coming to me and saying, you suck. You got everything wrong. John says, a PPK can apparently take down a helicopter, at least according to Spectre. But that's according to Spectre. A PPK on the water from several yards away. That's the key. That's the key, John. You got to get a couple of yards away from the helicopter with the bad guys, getting that good shot. which I love. Okay, then I love the scene in Sahara where the two main characters shoot a helicopter out of the air using a Civil War cannon. That was hilarious, and it's fun to watch. There's no way, and even in the movie, they're like, "There's no way this should have worked." To load a cannon with gunpowder that's over 100 years old, put it into the cannon, put a shell into the cannon with a fuse that's meant to blow up in midair and fire that. Actually utilizing a cannon back in the Civil War with a proper fuse and the right amount of gunpowder took years of proper training to know how much gunpowder to put into the cannon, so that way it wouldn't blow up or just have the cannonball plop out in front of you. Lighting the fuse was also a matter of real training to realize how long a fuse needed to be, so that way the shell wouldn't explode right in front of your cannon. There's a lot that went into making these cannons work, and they usually had crews of 6 to 8 people, sometimes more, to ensure that the cannon was properly utilized and didn't break while you were loading and firing it. He says, I can't help it when I hear Gojo. I win! John says, I know when a car looks cool, like the Impala or Batmobile or Aston Martin look cool, but I know nothing about them. John, I'm in the exact same boat. Show me a BMW and I'm impressed. Do I know anything about that car? No. It just looks cool. Sarah, John as well says, Sahara was hilarious, like when they rigged a sand sailboat to get through the desert. That is such a ridiculous scene. And they're using Amelia Earhart's plane. According to the book, it's supposed to be Amelia Earhart's plane. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's such a ridiculous scene. Or how they pay for a guy's car with 1 gold coin. Sahara is such a great movie. Okay, Sahara is a great example of a movie that drew inspiration from Civil War history and goes in a very different direction. Almost everything that they're doing in it is ridiculous, inaccurate, absolute fiction. But here's the thing. The film lover in me loves the movie because the writing is tight, the humor is good, the suspense is real, the villains are fun, and the heroes are even more fun. The historian in me laughs at all the historical inaccuracies, but I actually like it because it gives me, as the historian, a chance to talk about the real things that actually happened in the Civil War. And so that's some of the fun of Sahara. It's just a fun movie. It's a great adventure movie for anyone who's looking for a good desert movie. John says the author was not happy with that movie, but I highly enjoyed it. Yeah, I can imagine that the author probably wasn't too happy with some of the stuff they did. But I agree. It's a highly enjoyable movie. Absolutely worth the watch. Excuse me. Let me get out cough drop, because it is the time of the eternal cough for me. No, I'm not dying, and no, it's not allergies. It's just I have a bad tendency to get like a month-long cough, and it usually happens earlier in the winter. Not this year. Hit me in the spring. Ugh. Isa says, I was writing about code in one of my sci-fi stories a while back, and seriously had no clue what I was talking about, and I am not a coder. My brother gave me some tips and left me like, I see. Huh? Yeah, exactly. Getting help from other people doesn't make you an expert on that aspect of your story, but by getting help from other people who have a vested interest in that thing, that's their inspiration that they can bring to your story and help make your story even better, which comes back, I believe, to something that I believe it was Hafiz said about how you want to work with other people. And I think also Master Knight DH brought this up as well. You want to work with other people because other people will help to make your story better. If you do it all on your own, sure, it might be faster for you to do it that way, but then you're missing critical input and inspiration from other people that can help refine your story. And even though you might not know what you're talking about, they do sometimes, and it can really, really increase the quality of your overall story. John says, if you like Uncharted or the Mummy movies, you'll like Sahara. Yes, absolutely. I think Sahara is kind of like the more grounded version of Uncharted in terms of like what could possibly happen, even though there's some pretty ridiculous things. But man, Sahara is just so much fun. Such a fun story. And it's got Matthew McConaughey in it. I think that was part of the whole as some people call it, the McConaissance. The renaissance of Matthew McConaughey as he was transitioning out of doing chick flicks into action movies. Good actor. Maybe not. I mean, I can't speak to it. I don't know him personally. I've heard some weird stories about his personal life, but as far as acting goes, Matthew McConaughey is an amazing actor. All right, so reshifting back into inspiration territory. So one of the things one thing where I talked about is how you can take something that inspired you to then start up to like be the basis of the inspiration for telling a whole story. Now, here's something I want you to think about. Let's make it a little bit smaller. What is something that inspires you that you can add to a story, not to like tell the whole story? This is the nexus. This is where it began. But what's something that you're interested in? What's something that inspires you that you can put into your story to add a little bit more flavor and depth? So, for instance, I talked about how my interest in underground racing inspired Sandwich Desperados. For Bleed, Steam, and Steel, I added in my interest with history to help flavor up the story, to give you some interesting insights into the world. But history itself did not inspire Bleed, Steam, and Steel. That actually came about as an inspiration it was inspired by one of the missions that I was wanting to write for the Monarch Mercenaries. And so let me then really put this into a good question. I'm going to put it here into the chat. What is something that inspires you that you can add to your story as flavor or world building, or to build up a character? So it's not that this source of inspiration is going to drive the whole story, but rather, what is something that inspires you that you can add to a story to just add that extra bit of depth? So, like, for instance, in Mistborn, I don't know what it's actually across a lot of Brandon Sanderson's books. I don't know what it is, but the guy loves fashion. He loves talking about fashion, which is kind of funny because he doesn't look like a very fashionable guy. His wife has to dress him when he goes out in public. But he loves the concept of fashion, and he loves writing about it in his stories. And so you'll almost always find at least one scene in his books where someone is getting tailored for a cool suit or dress. John says, I'm working on a story about a tough old school detective battling a hulking slasher type villain. I've always been inspired by psychological thrillers and westerns and detective stories. Does that count? So, John, I would say like that counts as an inspiration for the whole story. But what's something else a little bit smaller that might inspire like an extra added element to the story? Something about a character or something about what happens in the plot. I think that like a good example, or at least an example, I can't exactly say if it's a good example, but an example, at least from my own stuff, would be an interest in maps. I like the way that maps look. Even though I'm not a brilliant cartographer myself by any stretch, I just enjoy maps. I think maps are really, really cool. So not only is it fun for me to add a map into one of my stories if I get the chance, but like mapping out like a scene, a city. So for an interest in maps, I want to map out one of my cities. I want to describe the way the city looks from a map's perspective. And so that kind of gives you an idea of like, oh, okay. Like it's not something that drives the whole story, but it just adds a little bit of flavor right there. And it's something that you're interested in. And so you're probably going to write those moments with a little bit more creativity, flair, and oomph because you yourself personally enjoy that. Hafi says, maybe I'll put a little bit of Malaysian culture like architecture, cuisine, or clothing in my story. It helps ground. Yeah, exactly. Hafiz, say, especially with the stories that you are telling. Yeah, every time that you add in one of those unique elements of Malaysian culture in your story, which, I mean, it's all throughout the stories that you tell, let's be honest. But I love seeing stuff that I don't immediately recognize. That's cool, because that's an introduction for me as the reader. Isa says something in all my stories is a hunting scene, or a few. That's cool. That's cool. If it's something that you enjoy and you have one of those little hunting scenes in there, that again, that's a little bit of inspiration. Like, ooh, I really like this. I really like this. One of the things that's a little bit inspiring for me again, but it's not one of those necessarily really happy things, but I love the idea of introspection because I do a lot of that myself. And so I have my characters do a lot of introspection, maybe too much at times. But it's that's a little quality that I like putting into my stories because I think introspection is a good thing. John says, like if someone were interested in jackets, so their character wears a special jacket that was given to them by their parent or friend. Exactly. Or maybe it's a very, like, for instance, in a spy story, they have like really specially tailored suits. Like, ooh, if I'm going to get a suit tailored, I have to get the suit tailored from this specific person because they just know my fit, they know my style, and they can also put in all the little pockets that no one will know where to look for them, or I can then hide stuff. Aha! Spy pockets. So that's a good example right there. An interest in jackets, or if you're interested in sports. And so even if you have a story that's not necessarily about sports, but you're like, you know what? What if I added in a sports scene? Because like I know sports, so go sports team, yay! Whatever sport you're into, if you're into basketball, American football for the rest of the world, aka soccer, hockey, bowling. You can add in all different kinds of sports. Even if your story isn't necessarily about sports, it's something that can help fill in a scene or be a hobby for one of your characters that gives them a little bit more depth and color than just character so-and-so. They do stuff. He says, put gadgets in my story because I like James Bond movies. Awesome. Having little gadgets is just, that's fun. One of the things that I like to do, because I love movies so much, movies inspire me. I like putting in movie references that my characters will talk about. Like if I've got something that's attached to Earth, I love having characters that reference movies. That to me is just a ton of fun, because that's something that I find really relatable. And you will experience that. Go out and mention movies or shows in public, and guaranteed someone's be like, "You seen that? Oh, I have found one of my people." We communicate through movie references a lot of the times. No, Luke, I am your father. Which is the incorrect quote. It should be, no, I am your father. No, that's not true. That's impossible. John says, I love the Bond films. Oh, man. Amazon is going to screw over the James Bond movies. Well, just a quick aside. I have no faith whatsoever in Amazon that they can deliver a good James Bond show or movie. Amazon has not proven to me in any way that they are capable of that. And that's just, that's really disappointing. That's just really disappointing. No, I am your grandfather. John says, I remember you giving a talk and you quoted The Dark Knight Rises. Yes, John. Oh, you remember that? I had my little talk, and I'm like, I have a talk here, which it should be speech, but I have a talk here telling the truth about Harvey Dent. Proceeded to fold it up and put it into my pocket. Perhaps now is not the time. And and because I got so into the quote, I folded up everything I was supposed to say. I'm like, well, that's awkward now. It'll look really awkward if I take it out and start reading from it. So I'm just going to go off of memory. And just started talking. Oh, that was fun. That was a fun day. As it says, I suppose I should mention all of my stories have swords. Even the sci-fi and post-apocalyptic ones. Yeah, because swords are awesome. And everyone at some point is going to find a reason to have a sword again. John says, I'm not looking forward to Amazon James Bond. Yeah. It's not going to be good. Which I know that I know that Henry Cavill is really, really busy right now with a whole lot of other projects, but I don't know if any of you have gotten to see his audition for James Bond. Now that he's older and he's learned to be a whole lot more suave, like he was already really suave back in his 20s, but he's matured. He's more suave. His acting is more on point. He could do an amazing James Bond. So good. John says, we're going to get a bunch of spin-offs that no one cares about. Moneypenny will become 008. Em will have a whole backstory where she's now Blofeld's mother. Oh, I mean, I know that you're probably joking about the whole Em is Blofeld's mother, but I can totally see Amazon doing that. I know that they want to do a Moneypenny show. And Moneypenny is there as a joke character. And that's what she is. And M is just there to help to deliver the the mission and the motivation to Bond. And so like it's you get more interactions with Q, and we don't need a Q spinoff. Not at all. I says Henry Cavill as James Bond, Super Bond. Yeah, Henry Cavill would be an amazing James Bond. And yeah, his audition is on YouTube. Like it's definitely worth checking out. John says his audition was actually pretty solid. It was. He was reenacting the scene with where he's playing across from Onatopp. From Goldeneye, and he did a good job. The only thing is that I think he was speaking way too softly, but he had the posture, he's got the looks, and he delivered all of the flirtatious scenes and quotes just perfectly. And the guy can say a lot with his facial expressions. He is an expressive actor. And I don't think people give him enough credit for that. Henry Cavill knows how to emote. John says these characters work when they're with James Bond, not so much by themselves. Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like in other stories and other spin-off stories, I have a hard time really getting into them. So, like, for instance, I love Fablehaven and I love Brandon Mull as an author, but I'm not sure if I want to read his spin-off book for Fablehaven about Noel and Doreen. And that's because I never liked Noel and Doreen much. Like, they're there as the characters who tempt Seth to do silly things, but they don't really add much to the story at all. They're joke characters. And a joke character is really hard to give a standalone story to, because a joke character has to play off all the other characters in order for them to work. A good example of making a joke character actually work on their own is Wits, the one of the characters written by Brandon Sanderson. And the funny thing is that he also then wrote a spinoff for the character Lopin, and I had a hard time getting into it because Lopin is a joke character, and Lopin doesn't really change much. Lopin is a good example of the unchanging protagonist, where there's really no character progression. His story is about how he stays the same no matter what happens, which can be done well, but I felt like Lopin needed to change, and that was something that I found frustrating. I've been told that he does evolve as a character later on, but that was just that was a difficult slog. So I never finished that book. But Wit by himself is a fascinating character because his humor, as you come to find out, is his way to hide the pain that he feels, because he's a character with a lot of guilt and pain. And so his humor is his way of playing that off and of hiding how he actually is suffering. John says, Xena, Angel, Frasier, those spin-off characters are the exception, not the rule. You know, excellent point. Because yes, Xena Princess Warrior was a spin-off. Great spin-off. I enjoyed Angel. I've had conversations with other people who didn't like Angel as much, and I feel like that's really more of a taste thing. When you got to know Angel, did you like him because he was with Buffy, or did you like him because he was his own character? If you liked Buffy more than you liked Angel, then I think the Angel show just didn't land quite as well for other people. John, which show did Frasier originally belong to? I'll admit, I'm actually stumped by that one. Omega says, honestly, I have an idea where a dark world based on a stage is basically comprised of areas where they are structurally the same as the stage in form. It's based on the fact that all you have is the... Oh, so he was in Cheers. Okay, because that was what I wanted to... That's what I wanted to jump to, but I don't know Cheers well enough to say that, oh yeah, no, he was that character in Cheers. Just like I recently found out that the guy who plays the demon in The Good Place was the bartender. And then the moment that was pointed out to me, I saw it. I saw the connection, but I totally did not know that actor. Frasier was actually introduced as an antagonistic foil to the main character, but he became really popular. Yeah, that can sometimes happen. Characters can absolutely take on a life of their own where you don't expect them to become as popular or as meaningful or as influential as they end up being. That absolutely happened with me when writing the characters Tori and Nessa in The Legend of the Ten Lords. They were never even planned to be in the story to begin with. Not at all. But I realized that Ben needed other teenagers to play off of in the world of Hallie Cruise. And so I thought I would introduce them, and they were just kind of going to be there, kind of like little sweet sounding boards to Ben. And then they ended up becoming his friends and really interesting and engaging characters for me to read and to write. And so Tori and Nessa then basically became leading support characters in the franchise. And now, like years later, I'm like, okay, when I end this saga of 6 books, should I do like a Nessa and Tori spinoff? Like, that'd be fun. But I don't know. I'm not yet going to commit to that because I got too much other stuff to write. And let's see how popular, how well read The Legend of the Ten Lords ever might become before I start thinking about writing a spinoff for a character that no one's read before. So piecing together what Omega is saying, it's based on the fact that all you have is the stage and how it's supposed to represent a lot of locations. It's also inspired by the Doom Madhouse, where the titular house serves as the foundation for a lot of the locations when you move on throughout the mod. Okay. Interesting. I like that idea. That's a good inspiration for the setting of a story. Thanks for sharing that, Omega. John says Wolverine was basically just a gruff, tough guy originally, and they even planned on killing him off, but he just exploded in popularity. Yeah, there's another good example. Wolverine was not meant to last very long, and now it's hard to think of the X-Men without Wolverine at the forefront. Like, actually ask people, who's the first X-Men who comes to mind? And like back in the 80s, I think that, at least according to people who were way into comics in the 80s, I believe that it would be like a toss-up between Storm, Magneto, and Jean Grey. Then you had Cyclops and Jean Grey and Professor X being more popular in the 90s. But then like Wolverine just kept on building momentum and popularity. And now in 2025, if you say X-Men, Wolverine is probably the first guy who pops into your head, followed after Deadpool. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, John. So let's see here. You guys, we kind of got a little bit on a tangent right there. People think he was the original X-Men, but he wasn't introduced until like 10 years later. Yeah, he came on the scene way later. Because it really was Xavier, Magneto, Scott, Jean Grey, Storm, as the at least to my knowledge, as the big ones in the beginning. Isa says it's always a great feeling when things just fall into place. Ain't that the truth? Yeah. So sometimes things just click. And like I said last week, those are like those happy accidents, because you can't plan for things to just fall perfectly into place. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And then as you're reworking things, as you're seeking out further inspiration, as you're editing, that's when you find those things that just fall into place, that just magically connect. And sometimes that means that you have to rewrite stuff. Oh, golly. Yeah, that's happened to me a couple of times where I'm like, oh, this works out really, really well. I like that. Oh, but that contradicts so much in this book. Okay, time to rewrite the book, because this works. This must stay in. Let's see here. As another bit of inspiration. I think one of the things that inspired me, and like this is I'll admit, in the beginning it was kind of petty of me, but it ended up becoming something really cool, and I ended up doing it more for myself rather than trying to be popular or trying to show up anyone. Was when Nathan and Camille were both writing dragon stories, and I wasn't writing a dragon story. And one of my best friends, she's maintained for a long time that it's so hard to write a good story with dragons because all the stories that you can tell with dragons have been told. And I took that opinion to heart a little too much. And so when I saw that Nathan and Camille were doing dragon stories, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write a dragon story that's just going to be so much better than everyone else's. That's a little bit of a petty place for it to come from. And so that might be one of the reasons why Whitefire has taken so long to write, because it didn't originally come from a good place of inspiration. But in seeking to be able to write that story, I ended up writing Tumblteller, which is a great story, if I do say so myself. And that was a fun one that was, again, inspired by my journey as an author and going through that process of trying to get your stories out there, being turned down by publishers and others trying to tear into your story. And so what do? Well, you get creative. You become independent and you fight back against the system. Long live indie publishing. If he says, why the no story about World War II frogmen, the predecessor to Navy SEALs and other amphibious special forces groups? Hafiz, I bet that you can find those kinds of stories. There are just unfortunately not many of them turned into high-selling books or movies. But that is something that I would love to see. There's a really great movie, if any of you haven't seen this one, called Monuments Men. I'll put this right here. Monuments Men. is a great story about, people might have heard about the guys who tried to save art in castles and historical sites during World War II. The story of the Monuments Men is incredible. And and it's something I definitely recommend. Oh my goodness, I don't have a dedicated dragon story. What is wrong with me? See, that's what I thought as well. But I'll be honest, writing a good dragon story is difficult. And Camille and Nathan really have their great inspiration for their stories. And I hope one day that you guys will be able to get to see their stories fully written and edited and in your hands, because they are fun. They were fun when I first read them back in graduate school, which Camille's Harem is going to turn 10 years old this year. We haven't had our YouTube channel for that long, but our writing group has been around for almost 10 years. And I hope that everyone will get to see their stories someday soon, because they are fun, even from 10 years ago. Just a good joyride, a good fantasy joyride with a lot of really unique, interesting elements that I myself would never have come up with. Drawn from their own inspiration of the YA stories that they had read, the Legend of Zelda games that Nate had played, and all these other things, and the things that they wish that they had seen in those stories. John says that had Clooney and Matt Damon, right? I'm trying to remember if Matt Damon was in it. Yes, it has Clooney. It has John Goodman. Let's... John was 10 years. Oh, geez, life goes by too fast. Yeah, it doesn't feel like 10 years. It doesn't feel like we've been a writing group for 10 years. And it doesn't feel like Flagstaff was that long ago, man. But yeah, it's been 10 years. 10 years this May. Let's see here. Quickly looking at Monuments Men. 2014 film. Yeah, with Matt Damon, George Clooney, John Goodman, Bill Murray. Yeah. Excellent movie. And also, later this year, so in May, we're going to try to get together as a group and have a 10-year anniversary celebration of Camille's Harem, and hopefully have a chance to not only do some fun writing, but also hopefully like do an episode or two of all of us together, so that way you guys can hear all of us and just have a good time. And I've also been thinking about maybe we should re-upload our old podcast episodes. Like, you can definitely see how raw we were back in the day, but oh my gosh, there's some fun stuff that comes out of that. Like our like some of the bad fanfics that we read or that we ourselves created. One of the ones that we did. Actually, I got to pull this one on the 5th champion. So we did a Harry Potter fan fiction that was just absolutely, it was tailored to be awful. And we had one person who actually listened to it while driving, and they said that they nearly got into a car accident. because they were laughing so hard. Let me see if I can post this one right here. If the link will go through. Yay, there's the link. So Scott says, "Oh no, the 5th Champion was hilarious." And the audio is just so is so funny. He says, 10 years ago, I was posting hot takes on gaming on Miiverse. Good times. Yeah, where were you? Where was everyone 10 years ago? And I say 10 years ago. At this point, 10 years ago, Camille's Harem had not yet gotten together, And I think at this time, I was recovering from my very first girlfriend. And that was a very unpleasant experience. Oh boy. Uh, which the ending, the way that all ended was that she decided to go she decided to like try to like emotionally blackmail me. And at that exact moment when she messaged me, it was really late at night. And so when people message you really late at night with like kind of threatening messages, they're definitely trying to manipulate you. And and at that exact time, I was bleeding out through a hole in my foot. And the doctor's like, yeah, you could possibly bleed out tonight. And I'm like, I refuse to die. I refuse to die through a flipping hole in my foot. And I got that text message, and I had some sort of really terse response. No, I don't care. And never talked to her again after that. That was the end of it. And it was a good thing, because that was a very toxic relationship. Scott says, I was living in Japan still. Wow, I can't believe that was 10 years ago. I know! That's crazy. That is crazy. How about Dragon's Baby? Did anyone tell a story about that? I'd like to see more stories about young dragons. Wings of Fire was a good series until it got a little bit too soap opera-y and weird. And I will admit, I'm still angry that Darkstalker was done dirty in that series, because when it's finally revealed how much of a liar he was, yeah, sure, but he should have just been killed, not stuffed into a young body again. Oh, that was so annoying. Justice for Darkstalker. Just kill him. It's one of the reasons why I actually have him as one of my characters in the Villainous Vigilantes, which was a fanfic I wrote years and years ago. Was because I'm like, I'm going to give Darkstalker a better ending, because I hated this ending. John says, 10 years ago, I was in Flagstaff and dealing with my ex's marriage and working at a youth shelter. It was a strange year. Oh, wow. Now that you write that, I'm like, wait a second. Because I do remember some of the details about that, John. That's so weird. It also must be weird for other people who are like listening on this. They're like, wait a second. Like Lars knows John from like 10 years ago? Wait, what? Yes, lore. Yeah, so we met back in college in Flagstaff. Man, what a place. What a place Flagstaff was. And interesting people. Good people, but also some interesting ones. Which actually thinking of exes and people like that. One of the weirdest experiences in Flagstaff was so I once took a girl out on a date, and it was just in Flagstaff. It was just meant to be a date for fun. I'm like, I thought that was the understood thing. I'm like, yeah, sure, we're just gonna go on a date. We're gonna have fun, whatever. Like, I'm not even gonna bother trying to hold her hand or anything. We're gonna go to the planetarium. We're gonna enjoy the setup up there. We're gonna have a look at the stars. It'll be nice. 2 hours max. I take her on home. Boom, date done. And it was fun. We had a great time in the planetarium, checking out all the different exhibits. We went out to look up at the stars. And then she's like, Lars, you're exactly the kind of guy I'd want to marry. And I'm like, what? This is the first date. And this isn't even like, I want to get to know you because I think you're super hot. It's like, I just want to have fun. And so I'm just like, where's this going? And she then said, but it's not you. I'll look for, if I find someone else like you, he will be the guy. And I'm like, thanks. I don't know what to do with this information. Exactly, Scott. Way too soon for that kind of stuff. I'm like, this is a first date. And this was a date just for fun. I had no intention of getting in a relationship with you. I just wanted to do something fun with a girl. And then about like 4 months later, she introduced me to her then fiance. And she's like, Lars, I found him. He's just like you. And I'm like, thanks. I don't know how to process this. Yeah, John, I'm pretty sure I did tell you that story because I'm like, I cannot believe that this actually happened. Interesting is one way to put it. All right, so yeah, how did you respond to that? You're welcome. Oh boy. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm flattered that you went looking for someone like me. I mean, I'm right here, but see, and now that could be inspiration for a story. The challenge, the woes of Lars's dating life could easily be a really hilarious show or movie, based off of all the weird stuff that has happened to me in the world in my attempts to date. Oh boy, I think. Okay, so little story time, and I've wanted to actually put this into a book, but it sounds so ridiculous that you're all like, they're like, there's no way, there's no way that that this actually happened. So this was in high school. I asked a girl out. Now then, you need to know a little bit of the backstory for this. Yes, my prom story is absolutely a climax for what the weirdness of my dating life. There is one other story that can rival the prom date, because that was the night that I effectively was on a date with 3 girls at the same time. That was a very interesting night. So it like dumb high school stuff. I said stuff to the girl that I shouldn't have said, and then I had the audacity months later to ask her out. So I understand that she didn't really want to go out with me. She should have just said no. But this is what she did, and I kid you not. So I didn't drive at the time. She drove, so she picked me up for the dates. Okay, I'm totally fine. I'm totally cool with that. We're going out to the movies. She brings along her younger brother and his best friend. Feels a little weird, but okay. When we get to the movie theater, half of the football team is there. And the guy who she was actually dating at the time, I didn't know she was dating anyone. The guy that she was dating at the time is there, and the football players ring her like bison. So her boyfriend goes on up to her with the popcorn and the drink and saddles up next to her. The football players form an impenetrable barrier around the girl. I got the message at this point. I'm all like, this isn't a date. This isn't a date. What the heck is this? And then the football players escorted me into the movie theater and sat me the furthest away possible from the girl. And then they made sure to surround me so I wouldn't migrate on over to her, with half of the football team then taking up an entire row with her and her boyfriend there on the other side. I actually didn't feel bad. I was laughing because it was so ridiculous. I'm like, this can't be real. This cannot be real. What the heck? And so I just enjoyed the movie. It was a comedy. It was fun with Dick and Jane, which is another fantastic movie. I was laughing my head off, half in part because the movie's hilarious and half in part because the date was ridiculous. A simple no would have been fine. Yes. Bobby, it makes me wonder how she felt about it. I would love her story. I don't know what the heck is going on. I don't even know where she is anymore. She actually, this is one of those instances where the where the high school couple actually did end up getting married afterwards, after they graduated. And as far as I know, they're still together. So congratulations to them. But it was so over the top. Master Knight Dage says, "What is with girls like that? I don't know. That was a really weird date." Master Knight says, "Little wonder why I'll calling out girls' conduct in my work. That mess with football players was just scummy." I mean, from a certain perspective, yes, but also at the same time, like that was that was just, it was funny. Like in the moment, I realized just how ridiculous this was. I realized it wasn't a real date anymore, and I just went with the flow. And you know what? I didn't get pummeled by any football players, because the football players are like, okay, this guy gets it. This guy knows what's just happened to him, and he's not throwing a fit. He's enjoying the movie. We're all going to enjoy the movie together, and it's going to be a great time. The drive home was super awkward. It was dead silence, except for when I talked with her younger brother and his best friend. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, that was one of the weirder dates in high school and in general. Which, yes, leading up to the prom date is absolutely one of those takes the cake moments. Funny thing is that the date itself, me and the girl, was absolutely fine. Like, fun time. We had a great time together. The night ended well. Her dad didn't pummel me because I got her home late. Though for Scott, who's just all like, where do you get some of your fetishes? I think that it got born from taking out the forward basketball player on the girls' team to the prom. So she was at least a foot taller than me and could absolutely tie me in knots. That was sexy. All right, we're absolutely off track here. Imagine a version of happening of the sort, but the one in your place becomes bros for life with the football players. Yeah, I would totally write that. I would totally write a story like that, and I should write out a story just based on my ridiculous dating experiences. In The Legend of the Ten Lords, there is an experience that's kind of a blink and you miss it moment that I added in that was based on a really real thing that happened, where these guys wanted to get rid of this one dude, and so they decided to force his social demise. They picked him up and they heave-hoed him into the girls' bathroom. And all the girls thought that he was a pervert and screamed at him and chased him on out. He's like, "It's not my fault! It's not my fault!" Oh boy. John says, "I hung out with this girl once who had a boyfriend, but was very vocal about her feelings to me, but didn't want to cheat. But she liked me, but she didn't want to cheat. I had no idea what to do." That is frustrating. At that point, you're just all like, you've got things you need to work on. I'm going to go to someone who likes me, who doesn't have strings attached. Scott says, I never asked this question. You just outed yourself on live for your own mysterious purposes. I did, didn't I, Scott? I did. Hey, I've got no shame much. Fias, is it bad the question you into open relationships came to mind? Well, open relationships. If you want, okay, unsolicited dating advice from the guy who has absolutely failed at dating. Here's the thing. Dating, at first and foremost, should be about getting to know people and finding out if you can actually have a good time with them. Fun, great conversations, similar interests, or maybe you don't have similar interests, but you find out that you can share that with each other. That's what dating should be in the beginning. And then when you start developing actual feelings for each other, then that's what you should be focusing on. If you have open relationships or polyamorous relationships, everyone that I personally know who has ever entered into an open or polyamorous relationship has hated it, has been betrayed, has been destroyed by it. Because as opposed to what people say, we are not a polyamorous species. Humans are monogamous for the most part. There are those people who like that kind of stuff, and for them it can work, but in real life it rarely ever does. And that's something I wouldn't want to tempt because I've had my heart broken enough. And I think it's better to respect yourself and to respect the other people in that relationship. So I personally would avoid that. And when it comes to writing, this is something again this is something I firmly believe, and this is one of the downfalls to so many harem stories, is that relationships are hard in real life and in fiction to do them well. And if you're going to write a harem relationship within a story or a polyamorous one, you need to put in even more effort to make that relationship feasible within the story, because most people will not believe it. Even though there's a lot of people online who say polyamory is always an option, it is, but it's an option that you will find out that most people are not willing to entertain, even in fiction. Harem stories are mostly there to introduce eye candy of either the girl variety or of the guy variety that the audience will then pick and choose their favorites, and then they latch onto that particular character and discard the rest. I have found very, very few harem stories that feel legit, that all the relationships are equal, and that you can feel the love between all those characters. The only real example, the one good example that immediately comes to mind, is Wheel of Time with Rand and his three wives, with Avienda, Min, and Elaine. And I, as the reader, I hate Elaine. I think Elaine is a selfish, entitled brat who the only thing that she brings to the relationship is that she's smart and has big boobs. That's basically it. Anyone who says that they like Elaine, I'm like, why? She's like a horrible character. Avienda is cool because she's like a hardened warrior turned magician lady who has all this honor, who loves Rand but feels torn because she knows that Elaine loves Rand and she doesn't want to betray her best friend Elaine. And you just feel for Avienda because she's caught between a rock and a hard place. And then Min is just amazing. This absolutely selfless girl who goes to the ends of the earth to help Rand, literally, and is just such a positive influence on the guy. And oh my gosh, I love Min. I love Avienda. And Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson definitely put in the effort to make that complicated relationship between those four characters work out. And it took multiple books. It took, 10 books about? Yeah, it took like 10 books to make that relationship, that harem relationship, actually work. Because even by like book 10, you're not convinced of it. You're not convinced it can work. It takes 10 books to make it work. So from book 4 to book 14. Whew! So let's see here. 5 says, what is a relationship Jenga? You need to pull off a perfect Jenga game for it to work. Yeah, pretty much. And it says, yeah, I'm starting to see your point. John says, personally, open relationships are not something I would want. Scott says, people play favorites and it leads to hurt feelings. I had a roommate that got into a relationship like this, and the head of the group took advantage of everyone in the relationship. And I know what instance Scott is referring to, and the one that I know most personally, because I knew everyone involved in it, it was something similar, and it just did not end well at all. It was not good. So again, it's really, really hard to make any relationship like that work in real life. And it's the same in fiction, because people know it, because people know that polyamorous or open relationships don't necessarily work in real life. It's one of the reasons why people might be drawn a bit to them, more in fiction because we want everyone to be happy by everyone ending up in the relationship with the person that they want. But if you're going to go that route as a writer, you need to put in the work to make it work out. I myself have only written one polyamorous relationship, and that was in my Bleach fan fiction. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good. I'll be honest. It was one of the weaker parts of my story. It was basically just shipping on steroids. And I thankfully have learned since then that if you want to make a relationship work, you need to put in the effort and detail to build those relationships within the story. Otherwise, people won't buy it. Scott says we're in the chaos tangent part that always happens, but is never in the title. Yep. Me reading the stream title again. By the way, we're in the storytelling part, the pulling inspiration part. We've been talking the inspiration part. Let Lars' horrible dating life be inspiration to you in writing your relationships. To bring it slightly a bit more onto track, as far as like writing, like inspiration for writing relationships goes, so in writing The Legend of the Ten Lords, a lot of the characters that are in those books are drawn from my experiences with very real people. Ben and Jessica are based on people in my life. I'm not going to say who. I will never say who. But they were people who had an influence on me both in high school and after high school, and I knew them both while in high school, and so Ben is definitely patterned off of one guy, and some other little aspects of other people I knew here and there, and then Jessica is patterned off of a girl that I knew in high school who. You would think that you know someone, but honestly, you find out sometimes that you really didn't. Like, come to find out later on, she was a closet nerd. She was into all kinds of nerdy stuff, but in high school, you would never have known that because that kind of thing, those kinds of things that she was into later on would have been social suicide, social destruction, an absolute landmine. One of the reasons why I was not popular in high school. And so after high school, she's like, I'm a nerd. I love being a nerd. Long before nerd culture became popular. And so I was like, wow, I really wish I'd known this about you and that you've been open about it, because like we might not have been like bosom buddies because of it, but it would have brought in some real commonality between me as the weird outcast nerdy guy and you as the outgoing, very popular jock. Imagine that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that people are like, ooh, and we could then write a romance. I did not insert myself into the story to be the love interest of Jessica. I am not Ben. Not at all. Ben and Jessica, however, are patterned after these two characters who, in real life, I don't ship those people together, but the guy that Ben is patterned off of once asked me if I could put in a good word for him with some of the really popular girls. And this is where like me on the lower rung of popularity at that time in school was all like, wait, what? There's a difference in hierarchy between the two of you? Because as far as I was concerned, this guy was amazing. He was really outgoing, very handsome, and I thought he was super popular. Come to find out, he was super handsome and very talented, but he was not as popular as I thought he was. And he was absolutely nervous to ask out one of the really, really cute, dancers that was in the musical with me at the time, because I was in theater. And so like that also kind of went then into the dynamic, inspired the dynamic between Ben and Jessica, where Ben has a major crush on Jessica back on Earth, but he's so afraid of telling her because he's like, this could destroy what little good relationship we have. And that he then has a friend who knows Jessica a little bit better, who's kind of rooting for them to get together. But and so like there's just that dynamic of will you pass along a good word? Can you tell me a little bit more about them? I really, really want to know. That experience is definitely something that helped to inspire and inform how I wrote the early stages of Ben and Jessica's relationship. And it's fun. It was fun to write, and it's one of those things where I had so much fun writing it, even though it was ultimately a small part of the story. That I'm like, it would be fun to go back and expand a little bit more on this idea, which is kind of what I did when I wrote Notice Me, Send Pie. I really tapped into the awkward dynamics of crushes in high school, my experience being in them, my experience observing them as a teen, and then as a teacher watching this stuff play out. I drew on all of those moments to help inform how I was going to write that short story, that novelette. Because it's longer than a short story, but not long enough to be considered a novella. Art says, "Oh, Lars, you're a gem, my friend. You made me feel better tonight. Yay! I'm happy I could do that for you." Let's see here. Five says, "Am I remembering this correctly? If you were more into drawing, you fit right into storytime animation. You know, I mean, if I could draw, I'm a horrible artist." All of the artistic talent went to my four sisters. They are amazing. I ended up being the storyteller. Five says, "Oh, and the only polyamorous relationship on my mind. I'm not too sure on even calling it that. A bit weird." Yeah, those kinds of relationships are a bit weird, aren't they? And so then, taking the tangent, all of that stuff all together. Again, this comes back around to before we got off on the big tangent, where I said drawing inspiration from things that allow you to add flavor to your story. Like, we know the big stuff that inspired our stories, like the games that we've played, the shows that we've watched, the books that we've read. But there are smaller things that we've experienced, that we know, that we like, that can help us to add a little extra flavor to our stories that weren't originally a part of what we intended to write, but can end up being really influential. So everything from weird dating experiences to hobbies that we have, experiences, places that we've lived, people that we know, those don't necessarily shape the whole story, but they help to shape elements of the story and bring the story to life in interesting, unique, and personal ways that can't be replicated again by AI. AI, at least now it knows a little bit about my dating history, because I guarantee that some AI engine is listening in on all of this. If I didn't say any of this stuff, AI would never know any of the stuff about me, and therefore could not draw on those experiences to flesh out characters or certain scenes with those details. And this is one of the reasons why I get so angry when I hear from critics about how like they say, write what you know. But then when they see people writing what they know, they're like, well, you don't know anything. Your life is boring. Your life is simple. It's too confined. It's too dumb. And so then they discard they discard out of hand whatever you're writing, because they say it's not good enough. They feel like you need to have lived a life like J.R.R. Tolkien, or have lived a life excuse me. Why am I suddenly blanking on the guy's name? The guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes. I just mentioned him by name earlier in the stream. Crud. Don't give yourself concussions, kids. You lose information. So they're all the old school authors who, by our estimation, who lived really colorful, really extravagant, wild, adventurous lives. We're like, oh yeah, right. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you, John. Yeah, Arthur Conan Doyle. What a colorful character. Look him up. His life is bonkers. So people are like, yeah, you need to either be like a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, or you need to be a J.R.R. Tolkien in order to write great stories, because they lived life. Not all of us can afford to live that way. And to be all honest, I don't want to go and fight in trenches. That sounds awful. I don't like, I know that stuff happens in the real world today, and I feel so bad for the people who have to go through that because I know it's monstrous as hell. I don't feel like you need to necessarily live through that in order to write a good story. You, through your own experiences in your own life, can earn inspiration that allows you to flavor and flesh out your stories in very interesting ways. And if you want to know more about what the horrors of war are, or what war is like, there are all these memoirs and documentaries that you can dive into and get those firsthand accounts that will help inform you even more. If you want to know more about psychology, study it. Talk to a real psychiatrist and psychologist. You want to learn more about science? Study it yourself. And then talk to people who know more about it. If you don't know something that you want to write about, the world is full of people who do know about that. And you just need to talk to them and gain that experience through them. And then you might be able to go on your own little adventures. You don't need to travel the world to be able to write worlds. I think, put that on a t-shirt. You don't need to travel the world to write worlds. But if you can expand your own world, even from the confines of your own room, you can write some amazing things. Fabio says, when the average person's story turns out to be average, that's fine, Sometimes a little fun or whatever average could even deliver. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's actually some real, great example of this, Midsummer Murders. Fantastic, funny murder mystery series on PBS. The show is old. It's all about murders that happen in quaint little towns in the backwater of England. There's nothing really extravagant about almost any of the adventures that the main characters go on, but they're always engaging and interesting. And so, I like that. You can turn something that seems very average into something really cool as you improve as a writer, as you add in fantastic, engaging characters, and put interesting twists and spins on things that people feel would just be natural and normal. Art says, isn't this why we have books? So we can relive those adventures these incredible people have? Exactly. You can learn through osmosis, through what other people have lived through, and that can inform your own knowledge and help to inspire you. And that's one of the things we were talking about earlier. The books and the shows and the games have inspired us. Absolutely, we can draw on those experiences that other people have written that help to teach us. John says, stories are a way for authors to put themselves in the minds and lives of others. Exactly. And this is a quote that I do like from George R. R. Martin, that he has read 100 books, has lived 1,000 lives. And it's true. It is absolutely true. Books can take you places. Scott says, average or a story with lower stakes can be a blast still if the characters are fun. I've been loving cozy fantasy stuff recently, and it fits in that line of thought very well. Exactly. I want to get to know cozy fantasy a little bit better because I kind of want to explore that. Those lower stakes stories where it's more about the characters and maybe sometimes taking fantastical people or places and making them small, relatable, aka cozy, where it feels like you can just be a part of that. And you don't have to be like Kaladin Stormblessed, who is the grand hero of Roshar, going across the world, fighting enemies in the skies with magic. That's cool. And his adventure with depression is very relatable. But that doesn't mean that his story is better than a cozy tale about the drama in a knitting club. In fact, there's actually some really hilarious and fun and well-written stories about knitting clubs. And so there's a wide space in literature and in the lives of the world audience for all kinds of tales. Fabio says, recently this indie Mega Man X spiritual successor idea has been popping up in my mind even more. Obviously, a lot of inspiration goes into making something like that, but I feel the bridge of worrying about plagiarism opened up the tiniest bit from it, eh? Well, if it's a fan fiction, it's fan fiction, baby. Unless you're dealing with someone like Anne McCaffrey's estate, which she hated people using her stories. Oh man. And so she has it in her will that her estate is supposed to spend money going after people who do artwork of her stories that have not been approved by her estate. And also they even tried to take down fan fiction. That's just utterly ridiculous. That goes way too far. But Anne McCaffrey's weird that way. Vibe says, I'm sure I could pizza tower my way about it or something. Yeah, or you could be like our friend Nate, who his story is very, very heavily inspired by The Legend of Zelda, and you can see it there in the pages of his story. But it's his own story, man. Hannah's got to go. Thank you, Hannah, for being around. It was great having you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Five says, I don't mean fan fiction. Spiritual successor, like what people have said Freedom Planet is to Sonic. Oh, okay. So I don't know Freedom Planet, so I'll just have to take your word for it. All right. But let's see here, man. We've been going now for nearly 3 hours, and I'm beginning to feel it in my voice. 3 hours worth of talking. Woo-wee. And it says, I got to go. I'm tired. It's complicated. All right. So, well, Hannah, you take care. And again, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to close up here pretty soon as well. Because, yeah, my voice. Bobby says, I don't want the heroes to be straight up be X, hero, X, Zero, and Sigma. John says, since I'm not a spy, I could never write a James Bond story. Yeah, that's not going to fly. LOL. Yeah, exactly. And let's also point this out right here. That Broccoli, good old Mr. Broccoli, he patterned James Bond based on what he wanted spycraft to be like, because he was a spy in World War II. And it was not as glamorous as he had hoped it would be. Don't worry, Arts. I'm going to take a drink of water. There we go. And then you got someone like Tom Clancy, who takes all the legit spy work and intel work that normally teams of people would do, and just crams it all into one person. Same thing like with Jack Reacher. Takes all of this inspiration and real life experience of what would be teams of people and just crams it all into one person. And so unrealistic, but rooted in something. I'm Omega says, got 2 sumo fics. One, the No Evil Dino story. Another for Dowboats. Oh boy, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say it as I can. Dobutsu Sentai Tsuyogu, based on one of the episodes. Okay, nice that you've got those fics going. Keep on working on them. If I was this, I'd be dead from that. Then from being Brazilian and not my OC's nationalities. John, you're also coughing. Oh boy, yeah. So I probably got about another 3 weeks of this cough before it finally goes away. I'm Omega. I'm also going to try and finish a one shot. Hey, awesome! Share that with us when you're done. Fabi says, if you're no shape shifting slime alien, you wouldn't know nothing about writing it, pal. Yeah, exactly. And that's why that criticism of the whole like write what you know, but what you know sucks just doesn't fly for me. The thing is this, like where that criticism comes from does come from a certain place where, again, Hollywood staffed a lot of their writers' rooms with people who only knew Hollywood and coffee shops and talking politics, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the problem is that doesn't necessarily make for the most engaging or interesting stories, at least not across all different genres. That might work for 1 or 2 stories, or for a particular genre, but it doesn't work for everything and for everyone. And so I can see why some people are like, yeah, these people just don't know, like they write what they know and they don't know enough. However, still, someone who is a creature of Hollywood and loves coffee and politics can still write a very engaging and interesting story without having left Los Angeles. Some of the writers that people cheer today didn't really leave America at all, and were more creatures of the city than they were of the town. Like, but for crying out loud, the backstory of Superman and being raised in the Midwest by the Kents on a farm. The guys who wrote that inspirational story that people are like, oh, Americana, were from New York City. They were not out on a Midwestern farm. They were they were trying to write a story that would help people realize that immigrants, especially Jewish immigrants, were not evil people, and that everyone, including outsiders, had something to bring to society, and that American ideals could shape people into very positive and powerful individuals who could make the world a better place with those ideals. That's amazing. And again, it's written by guys who did not come from a Midwestern farm, but from a metropolis on the East Coast, on the American East Coast. The difference in cultures between those two regions of America is vast. And yet they wrote it, and it was inspiring to people. So you write what you know. And if you don't know something well enough through your own experience, you can learn about it. And that's what people need to take away. And that's where some of that inspiration is going to come. Some of those things that can really make your stories feel so fleshed out and so alive and so colorful will be things that you'll learn along the way. Things about engineering, things about fashion, things about history, things about literature, things about media, learning factoids about random people, stories of people that you've gotten to know. Again, I said I could write a story based on what happened in my own backyard, taking down eucalyptus trees. And it had almost nothing to do with the experience of actually taking down eucalyptus trees. But it was a story inspired by how I saw my backyard changing. And what would it be like? What if there were people living in those trees? And so, yeah, again, inspiration can come in all different kinds of ways and from all different kinds of places. And as you broaden your horizons, as you learn more, as you practice your craft of writing, you will become better storytellers. And that's the kind of motivation and advice that needs to be given to far more authors, not just to novice authors like so many of us, but also to people high up on the food chain in traditional publishing or in Hollywood. Because I think that if we return more to that way of thinking, I think that we would see some really amazing stories come out of these people, because the imagination just needs to be stirred. It just needs to be fired up a little bit, and then amazing stuff can come out. As John says, yeah, J.K. Rowling was inspired to write Harry Potter on a train. Yeah. And through her experience with the private school system in England, and her own experiences growing up as a girl, where she was, all that inspired and informed her knowledge of what number 4 Privet Drive was going to be like, of the Dursleys and their neighbors, and how a weirdo like Harry wasn't going to fit in, and what a magical school in England could look like. Which the funny thing is that because she knows the English school system so well, when she tried to impose that kind of knowledge onto other schools, the other magical schools, it didn't quite work out. Like the American magical schools, that would be interesting to see, because America historically and traditionally does not like education. I'm sorry, Americans just don't. It's kind of sad. It would be interesting to see what a magic school system in America would look like. Would you draw on that horrible disparity of American education, or would it actually be a good educational system and be what it ought to be? And how would that look different? Because Americans do things very different than people do over in the UK. Just like French schools and German schools and Eastern European schools are very different from one another, and from England and from America. Education is different everywhere you go, and you kind of have to inform yourself of that. That's something that J.K. Rowling could have and should have done a little bit more research into. But then again, we never go to Beauxbatons and we never go to Durmstrang, so maybe it's okay. We were just meant to meet characters like Fleur Delacour and Victor Krum. Fabio, let's see. Fabio says, with that Hollywood problem, it came to mind to say some people just confine themselves into writing only what they know, and either never try to stray or deliberately try to never stray. Yeah, there's some people like that. There's some people who just write what's in their comfort zone, which is okay. But the problem is that if someone writes, for instance, if someone is only good at writing murder mystery stories, asking them to write a romance novel is probably not your best bet. There's a chance that they could write a good romance, but it will probably be in the guise of a murder mystery story. And that's where you can blend genres and everything. But for instance, as I love writing fantasy. Fantasy's got my bread and butter, but I've written a more grounded rom-com. I've written a spacefaring story that kind of breaks all idea of genre. Sandwich Desperados is a satire, is a satirical spoofy take on a lot of different things, like the Fast and Furious franchise and Jimmy John's Tucson. And so I've written other things, and it's possible, but you need to be able to allow yourself to spread your wings, which Hollywood and traditional publishing like to keep us in boxes. If you write one thing really well, then they only want you to write that one thing. And that can be really difficult as a writer, especially if there's so much more that you wish to tell, which is usually why other authors, if they get really clever, start blending genres. So like, oh, I'm only allowed to write epic fantasy, like Brandon Sanderson. He's the epic fantasy guy, and they only want his epic fantasy, but he wants to write other stuff. So what does he do? He wants to write a rom-com, and so he decides to write a rom-com that takes place on a mystical world. Huzzah! Blend the genres. John says you definitely have to have an emotional intelligence to write a strong story. LOL. Fabio, I'm not sure exactly what my blender's got in it. I mean, I know some, but when tragedy pops up, I wasn't really there beforehand. Okay, so I said I'd end it. So we're gonna wrap it up here, guys. So real quick, as far as next week and the live stream goes, we are going to have a special guest with us next week. The guy behind the YouTube channel, the Obsidian Archives, will be joining us for a special Q&A session. He just celebrated his reaching 10,000 subs over on his channel, which is awesome. But we are going to talk about the story that he's been writing. What you see on YouTube. You can watch his story on YouTube. I've had the chance to read his book. His book is still in the querying stage. He's been trying to get a traditional publisher to pick it up. So no guarantees on if or when his book will ever be made public. But I've had the chance to read his book and compare it to what he's been doing on YouTube. And so we're going to have, so he is in the Discord. He's there in our Discord server. He pops in every now and then. We're going to have the chance to ask him some questions. I've already submitted to him questions that I wish to ask, but I'm hoping that you guys as well will have your own questions that you can then pass along to him during the live stream. And that, and my hope is that, especially for people who want to go into like making your own indie shows and your own shorts and whatnot, he has done a lot of work in doing little animated shorts to help tell and promote his story. And so I'm hoping that we can pick his brain a little bit and learn some things that might help you guys out. I was listening to some of his Q&A today for his live stream, and and there's some things that he plays close to the chest because there's deals and whatnot. So like we can't probably get everything, but I think that we can still have a really interesting and engaging conversation that I hope will be very eye-opening to you guys. That'll help you to see what you might be able to do with indie animation, what resources and talent are out there to help you out, and maybe learn a little bit from his approach and his style, and see if that's something that might help you out in your own storytelling quest. So please come ready next week for that. There will be more details as we get closer to the day. So please keep an eye out for our community posts, because I'll put stuff out there. And I'll also try to update stuff as well on our Discord. So with all of that being said, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this live stream and on this adventure that we call writing. I hope that you have a good morning, day, night, wherever you are at. And until the next video, y'all, watch out for those moments of inspiration, and choose.